Chapter 211. While Roland was still thinking hard about his path, an inconceivable scene was occurring in the distant plains. It was as if this place had transformed into the chaos abyss. Large numbers of demons were forming groups and beginning their own hunting activities. Wherever their armies went, dangerous earth spiders would be dug out of the ground, and sand dragons would be instantly drowned out like ants swallowing elephants. The opponents that gave Roland headaches were completely useless in front of this endless demon army. However, these creatures of chaos that were brown in color were somewhat different from the pure demons in the chaos abyss. Compared to their evil cousins in the chaos abyss, their skin was brownish yellow, and they didn't use the fire or acid magic that demons commonly used. Instead, they used the incredibly rare earth magic. Not only that, they all had excellent physical attack abilities. It was as if they were the native residents of this place, just like those earth elemental plane creatures with thick skin and thick flesh. One tribe after another was destroyed. Faced with the endless demon army, even the powerful sand dragon was only able to fly a few more kilometers before powerlessly collapsing to the ground. And when that sand dragon lay on the ground on its last breath, waiting for these twisted creatures to give it the final blow, what arrived was a sand boat. For Golden Land dragons were pulling the sand boat. However, their twisted horns and the smell of sulfur from their breath doubtlessly indicated that they were products of demonization. The sand dragon, Sardalon, was now blind in one eye. The remaining dragon eye viciously glared in that direction. In its mind, the one that would give it the final blow would probably be the main culprit behind all of this. It was highly likely that it would be a powerful demon from the Chaos Abyss. Wow, such a large dragon. But the reality was that the dragons had miscalculated. A young blonde female knight walked out of the sandboat. Judging from her appearance, she was actually a human, and an incredibly young female knight at that. But before Sardalon could even self-destruct in order to deal the final blow, the female knight suddenly muttered something to herself. All right, I got it. I'll just demonize. Relax. I'll control chaos, not be controlled by chaos. Asterisk roar. Asterisk the furious dragon's breath created a shockwave that seemed capable of destroying everything. However, that meant that nothing had happened. Meanwhile, that female knight was already riding on Sardalon's head. Just as Sardalon was about to attack the other party, that dim yellow light of primal chaos enveloped him. Under the intense pain, his body began to recover, but Sardalon let out a pitiful cry of shock because demonic scales began to grow on his skin. Poisonous spikes appeared on his back. Sharp claws and fangs began to grow thicker, and a pair of wings appeared on his back. Sardalon was actually beginning to demonize. At the end of the day, chaos is just a distortion of existing rules. Although demons, as creatures of chaos, can't be born naturally, from a certain standpoint, only creatures with their own rules can be demonized and turned into chaos. However, we dragons do not have to worry. We are born with the power to resist the rules. Forcefully demonizing us? Even the Duke Fiend can't do it. Perhaps only the legendary son of the Abyss can do it. His past memories were being recalled, and the last of his consciousness was already starting to become hazy. There wasn't much time left, only enough for Sardalevin to mutter to himself. The Abyss Princess? Why is she here? After the dim yellow light faded, the dying Sardalon had disappeared without a trace. What remained was a gigantic pitch-black inferno dragon. That single dim yellow was the best evidence of his identity. Roar, roar, roar. The furious inferno dragon unfurled its new wings and blocked off the sandstorm's might as it flew towards the next high-level magical beast gathering location. Meanwhile, the newly born demons on the ground also responded to their master's call and headed towards their next target. On the inferno dragon's back in a small sandboat, Renee seemed to be talking to herself as she asked a question. Teacher Cavendish, what do you intend to teach me next? Let's review our demonization first. After that, let's practice our swordsmanship. From the very start, Roland had been mistaken about this matter. As a descendant of the mist, Renee was quite qualified. Even in the face of setbacks and difficulties, she was still able to maintain her tenacious and unyielding personality. The final scene on that snowy night made Roland feel as if he had seen his past self. However, it was also because of this misconception that Roland thought too highly of Renee, believing that she would be able to resist the temptation of the abyss by herself. But sometimes, not lowering one's head in the face of setbacks and despair and being able to resist temptation were two completely different things. It was just like how a person who was capable at work didn't necessarily have a noble character. A person who was tenacious and self-reliant didn't necessarily have the ability to ignore temptation placed in front of them, especially when the temptation seemed so beautiful. The demon prince's tempting words started ringing in Renee's ears the moment she was alone. And our night princess lived up to everyone's expectations and resisted the demon's temptation for as long as 5 seconds. That's right. That was how the situation developed. That was what Cavendish said at the time. Renee, how about I teach you? Don't listen to Roland. What can you possibly learn by practicing on your own? I don't think that's a good idea. Big brother Roland already said that I can't listen to you. I'm stronger than him. Who do you think I should listen to? Besides, your opponent is a demon marquis. As you are right now, she can kill you with a single slap. Please allow me to call you second brother as well. All right then, before I even finished speaking, I instantly succeeded in tempting her. Since it was far too easy, even the demon prince was shocked by how shameless Rain was. He paused in surprise for quite a while when he heard Rain's reply. Only then did he confirm that she wasn't joking and was actually telling the truth. I know that my talent is lacking, but I still know my own limits. Before I met Big Brother Roland, it wasn't that I wasn't working hard, but I wasn't even close to reaching the silver rank. Big Brother Roland has obviously overestimated me. Besides, I'm Renee, not Roland. I've always believed that there's nothing wrong with having power, and that there's no need to worry so much if you want to increase your power. Grasping power first is the best way. Renee's tone was quite sincere. To be honest, that was indeed what she believed. Unlike Roland, who could obtain power as long as he worked hard, Renee, who had only average talent, had already suffered enough from the pain of not having power. She was also numb to the fact that she worked so hard without any results. From the very beginning, she knew that she couldn't be like Roland, nor did she intend to force herself to be like him. In this aspect, she, who had experienced countless setbacks and despair, was actually very similar to Cavendish. She had a morbid admiration for power in her bones. If I had power, Donlon would have almost been destroyed. If I had the power to control my own fate, I wouldn't have been forced into marriage by the Ottoman nouveau riche, and my people wouldn't have been humiliated. At the age of 13, she was still a carefree and happy princess. At the age of 14, she put on her armor and went into battle. Now, at the age of 15, she had already become a famous knight princess in the Northlands. The ups and downs of her life made this vase princess, who used to be a pretty face, have a maturity far beyond her age under her playful appearance. She had always desired to control her own fate with her own hands, and this desire had never been satisfied by Roland's arrival. She respected and trusted her teacher, Roland. However, she had her own opinions about power. She didn't intend to argue about it, nor did she want her relationship with Roland to be affected by differences in beliefs. She simply used her actions to make her choice. Perhaps you've been waiting for this day ever since you rejected Roland's blood. However, it seems that you have an amazing accomplice to be able to trick Roland. In the distance, the accomplice Amelia, who is currently cooking a gigantic magical pot, sneezed. Someone's talking about me? Or is it cursing me again? Could it be that bastard? Beside her was a devastated battlefield. The Earth elemental plane, which originally shouldn't have any greenery, now had a grassland and forest. However, these grayish-yellow plants were already filled with the corpses of magical beasts who were originally in their true forms. With Amelia's assistance, the bloodline seal had never been effective from the very start. Otherwise, Cavendish wouldn't have been able to easily contact Renee, who was in another plane. In fact, he was even able to suppress Galena in so many battles due to the power of his bloodline. Perhaps I need to apologize to Brother Roland, but I naturally have to make my own decisions about my own life. I've had enough of hiding behind someone else's back and trembling. Roland's sacred sword was still glowing with a silver holy light. However, the Night Princess's eyes had already turned a dim yellow. The shadow of a demon appeared behind her, but she grabbed it in her hands. This girl's willpower was comparable to steel. Roland had never hidden his hopes and worries for the future. Although Renee seemed like a carefree person, she had a sharp heart. She hated her own powerlessness, and right now, even though she clearly knew that making a deal with a demon was no different from asking a tiger for its skin, she wouldn't regret today's decision rather than continue being a flower vase. Even if she might fall into depravity in the future, she wouldn't regret today's choice. Instead of regretting after the fact that you didn't take advantage of the opportunity, it's better to regret after doing it. Isn't that what you said in the past? By the way, Brother Roland had also left a famous saying to her. The response from Roland's soul was much more serious. Then, let me teach you how to control chaos. First of all, you must remember to control your own heart. Don't let chaos corrode your soul. Power is only a tool. If you end up being controlled by a tool, that would be far too laughable. The Prince of Chaos was actually teaching someone how to resist the corrosion of chaos. Perhaps, from a certain standpoint, Cavendish no longer viewed Renee as a backup physical body. Perhaps he was beginning to view her as his true successor. I only have one request. Use what I've taught you to defeat that Galena. Viciously beat her up in a direct battle. Could it be that she betrayed your bloodline? You're actually so angry? I don't think you're such a petty person. The feeling that she gives me is just like Roland back then. I'm afraid that she has already successfully fused with Roland's bloodline. Since that's the case, Roland will definitely teach her everything that he has learned in his life. Since you're my descendant and disciple, how can you be weaker than Roland's descendant and disciple? Renee came to a sudden realization. These big shots were always so serious over inexplicable matters. It seemed that this younger twin brother was going against his older brother. Since the two of them couldn't have a direct competition, then they would have an indirect competition through their descendants and disciples. Cousin Galena? I won't lose to her, regardless of which aspect. And so, after receiving Cavendish's teachings, Renee unscrupulously activated her own demonkin bloodline. Then, she created a demonized army in the mortal plane. At this moment, while Renee was studying the secrets of chaos on the dragon's back, a gigantic pillar of light suddenly rose up, causing a violent tempest to sweep through the entire mortal plane. Just as Renee was about to ask what exactly happened, she felt a wave of shock and disbelief surge up from the bottom of her heart. Even a powerful child of the chaos abyss actually felt fear. Roland, it would seem that I've still underestimated you. It would seem that we can have a good fight the next time we meet. Of course, I didn't know that far away in the mortal plane, Renee had already established a powerful army. And it was foreseeable that this army would only become stronger and stronger as time passed. The current me was using up all of my energy just to control the fusion of the earth and water elements. With the earth element as the skeleton and the water element as the bloodline, snow will fall and the icy plains will turn white. When the wind and snow stop, everything will return to peace. This wasn't some incantation. It was just a description that would deepen my self-influence. With its help, the scenery of my homeland reappeared in my mind. But this time, I wouldn't be satisfied with only being able to temporarily interfere with my soul world. The illusory world was slowly becoming reality, and I, who had transformed into an arbiter, was combining reality and illusion to create a new, independent world. Stonevilla's ocean bottle was currently emitting magic. With the help of the sword seal, the water element was activated as a child element. It began to emit an endless amount of frost. Meanwhile, the earth elemental heart had long since transformed into the ground beneath my feet, becoming the first piece of land for my new world. And what I needed to do was to combine them into one, obtaining the unknown from the known and allowing it to enter a self-contained cycle. I took a deep breath and pointed at the sky with one hand, causing the frost to descend. I pointed at the ground with another hand, causing the ground to rise. Next, I took a deep breath and clasped my hands together. Asterisk clack. Asterisk, there was the sound of gears colliding. The huge explosion that I expected didn't happen. I actually managed to combine them so easily. It would seem that I was too worried. Obviously, I was happy too early. The next moment, the two elements that I had just combined actually began to tremble and were about to explode. Damn it, if it explodes. The next moment, I thought of a gigantic canyon. But at this moment, I was unable to endure the reverse flow of elemental power. The elemental power was about to go berserk. Everything in theory should be correct. Why did such a situation occur? My power level. Perhaps others were right. The closer one was to death, the more brilliant one's mind would be. In an instant, I understood everything. That's right. I indeed had the ability to create things, and I had also used theories and foundational methods. However, I had overlooked something. When He created the world, she was already inconceivably strong. The backlash and chaos were nothing more than a small wave to her. But to me, it was an irresistible destructive force. Damn it, I'm just one step away. How could I possibly be at ease at such a time if I failed? But I was about to go berserk or even die, and I had no way to resist at all. If I had known earlier, I would have waited until I was at least a semi-god before attempting this. What happened? Suddenly, everything returned to normal. The berserk elemental power was like a domesticated dog that had been tamed, and it began to move according to my will. Fate points, 37624. The number of fate points suddenly popped up on my interface. My fate points were rapidly decreasing, which doubtlessly explained the source of this miracle. It also proved that this miracle didn't come without a price. 36521, 31435, 274, 21. It's not like my fate points just grew out of nowhere. Aren't you being too greedy? Leave some for me. I still need to reach the gold rank. System notification. If you still have time to retort, why don't you end this earlier? All right then, I had originally wanted to thank the system for saving my life, but let's forget about it. I fully focused on combining the elements, and when that damn fate point number jumped to 9,214, the process finally came to an end. Asterisk clack. Asterisk, it was still only the sound of gears clicking into place, but this time it was likely that the entire mortal plane could hear it. As for me, I could sense that in this original world, I now had an independent world of my own. Although there was only frigid winter Earth in this world, it was a world that belonged solely to me. Ding! Congratulations to my host for obtaining frigid winter Earth. The system is unable to analyze its specific effects and principles. However, it is able to analyze the basics of how to use it. Would you like to analyze it? This was the first time that I had ever heard of something that the system was unable to analyze. I was overjoyed and nodded, but I instantly regretted it. Fate points, 4,624. I instantly lost more than half of my fate points. Just as I was about to complain, I was astonished by the system's next message. Frigid winter Earth, an existence with no rating. Currently, the largest area that it can expand into is a three-dimensional space with a radius of 136 meters. It ignores all barriers and is capable of entering the ground. Recommended Effect 1, Death Chill. Anyone who steps into this frigid winter Earth will receive 1 to 100 points of ice damage, determined by the user. This damage cannot be avoided. Even the gods are unable to avoid it. Recommended Effect 2, Ice Sword. I actually managed to see 4 recommended effects here and there, and this was only the beginning. This was only a portion of the effects of this incomplete world. Where fortune arrives, misfortune lurks. I had just been pleasantly surprised when I received an urgent warning. Warning, because the earth elemental heart used to construct the foundation of this world is of inferior quality. Not only is frigid winter Earth unable to fully utilize its effects, it is also in the process of disintegrating. Host, please hurry and find a replacement. Disintegration countdown. 132 days, 6 hours, 10 minutes. All right then, I won't comment on how this bastard was so powerful, but was still only an incomplete product. I also won't comment on how the Earth Elemental God's Earth Elemental Heart was actually of inferior quality. The system was even considerate enough to give me an arrow pointing at the sleeping Earth God. It would seem that I need to hurry up. Omdarokin, just you wait. Chapter 212. Congratulations on the host's special class advancement, Lord of Winter. This advancement is exclusive to you and cannot be passed on to others. Congratulations to the host for entering the gold rank. Congratulations, host, for obtaining a special spatial barrier, Frigid Winter Earth. The disguise system has been installed. In the eyes of the gods, this is only a special soul world in its infancy. Please feel free to use it, but once you enter it, please remember to silence them. Congratulations to the host. The stingy system actually sent me a bunch of congratulatory notifications. This gold rank wasn't given to me by the system. It was my own breakthrough. Actually, none of this was important to me. The most important thing was that I had confirmed my future path of development. Perfect this world. I need to find divine weapons, materials, and souls to fill in the embryonic form of this world. Even if I am perfecting this world, I am also perfecting myself. Perhaps this path would be bumpy, and it would take an endless amount of time. It was also possible that I wouldn't be able to reach the end of this path in my lifetime. On this solitary path, it was impossible for anyone to guide me. However, I knew that at the very least, at the end of this path, there might be treasures that I desired. Then, let's give it a try. He couldn't suppress the excitement and joy in his heart. He was like a child who had just received a new toy and naturally wanted to try it out. However, the next moment, he heard the sound of a system notification. Due to activating the disguise system and planning skills, you have overspent your fate points. Please pay up the 2147 fate points you owe within 24 hours, or the system will seal your new world. No money? Use your to pay off the debt. Pooh! Immediately, he spat out a mouthful of blood. How could you do this to me at this time? You're giving me back my gratitude and gratitude just now. However, I didn't have the time to comment on this. Based on my understanding of the system, when it said something good, it might not actually be good. But when it said something bad, it would definitely be worse than expected. Since it said that it would detain my new world if I didn't pay within 24 hours, then it would really be detaining my new world. Wait, this is the core of my new class. If you take it away, won't I become a knight without a warhorse, a basketball player without a killer tennis ball, and a tofu pudding without candy? What's the point of that? Countdown, 23 hours, 59 minutes. System notification. Keep bullshitting, keep blackmailing me, you heresy of the sweet faction. I'll stop talking nonsense and quickly go earn some points. On Caro's map, the Herod Valley region was a forbidden zone because that was where the tower giants lived. This name wasn't very precise, but anyone who saw those gigantic stone giants would know where this name came from. Each of the stone giants was dozens of stories tall, their heads and shoulders reaching the clouds. The upper half of their bodies was a fortress, while their shoulders and heads, which were built into the shape of buildings, were the clock towers and turrets of the fortress. Its enormous body represented unparalleled physical strength. This giant's physical attacks could destroy the heavens and the earth, but what was most frightening was the hundreds of catapults in the stronghold. The reason for the birth of these existences had long since become unreliable. The pioneers who just arrived in the Earth elemental plane were ambushed by a tower giant. Not only did they suffer heavy losses, but they also mistakenly believed that an enemy faction had attacked them, believing that it was an archmage's doing. That was because the tower giant's bodies were one with the buildings, which doubtlessly meant that they were a special type of artificially created creature. Although they hadn't evolved to have self-awareness yet, their incomparably large bodies and countless catapults doubtlessly proved that they were war machines. The reason why the tower giants in the Herod Valley region were labeled as highly dangerous was because there were countless residents living within each tower giant's body. These residents formed a unique symbiotic relationship with the tower giants. Sometimes, the tribes living within would be stone demons, earth elementals, and other intelligent creatures. Sometimes, it was even possible to meet special flying units, such as gargoyles. Every tower giant was like a colorful box. It was impossible to know what tribe was inside before opening the box, and it was highly likely that it wouldn't be anything good after opening the box. Not only that, the tower giants lived in groups, and they even had a special method of communication. That was why fighting against a tower giant would be like a real battle. Just several dozen tower giants would be enough to create a gigantic army. Meanwhile, there were more than 400 tower giants in the Hera Valley. The total number of tower giants and symbiotic communities was innumerable. Just the tower giants gathered at the entrance of the valley were enough to make even the sand dragons not dare to enter this area. Only the most ancient existences knew that the greatest secret of this place was actually within the valley itself. These gigantic fellows were nothing more than guards, personally created by the most ancient existences. Who's that? He's actually heading deeper into the valley? The tower giants would occasionally come out to hunt and patrol. In order to avoid unnecessary losses, the various factions would set up their own temporary outposts at the entrance of the valley. Karo's mages stationed here, apart from keeping an eye on the giant tower giants' movements, were more important in persuading the greenhorns to go home. What? A forbidden zone? That's over SSS? I was born to do great things. What's so special about a forbidden zone? It's nothing more than a treasure trove and a place for miraculous encounters. Got equipment and inheritances, I'm coming. No stairs? Perfect. I'm going to jump off a cliff. These types of idiots would appear every year, and there would be plenty of people who were poisoned in Knight's novels. Sometimes, when they were annoyed, the mages stationed here wouldn't try to persuade them anymore and would just let them fend for themselves. Fortunately, there weren't too many idiots this year. The mage stationed here, Karo, had been worried that there wouldn't be enough jokes to talk about after this year's change of guards. Now that he finally met one, he was actually quite happy. But before he could even go forward and ask about it, he stopped on his own. That gray-cloaked figure only glanced at him, and he felt as if he had been struck by lightning and his entire body went numb. So strong. I've never heard of a lightning archmage coming here before. The next second, he realized that his good intentions were unnecessary. That figure had already disappeared without a trace. The tower giant's orders were to attack all individuals that weren't part of their own species. Along the way, the constantly flickering and disappearing figure suffered countless attacks. Unfortunately, those clumsy monsters couldn't even touch him, let alone see him. But when he reached the valley, the gray-cloaked figure stopped and quietly waited until a voice spoke up. Camderon, what's so important that you need to personally come find me? Even though he was facing a powerful earth elemental god, this ancient earth elemental god didn't show any hesitation or respect at all. It was as if he was asking a junior. And Camderon didn't mind Ainslow's impoliteness. In fact, he was more than happy to be direct. Ainslow, do you want to become the earth elemental god? Do you want to become an existence equal to me? Elemental creatures were always so direct in their interactions. They were like ancient tribes that lacked understanding of social hierarchy. This was especially true for elemental creatures who hadn't had much contact with mortals. They would say whatever was on their minds. Of course, if Ainslow had been an ordinary mortal, Ainslow would have long since stomped him down without saying anything. Of course I want to. What do you intend to do? Ainslow's loud voice echoed throughout the entire valley. Ainslow didn't hide her desire at all. As one of the oldest existences in the mortal plane, Ainslow had desired to become an earth elemental god for countless years. However, there could only be one earth elemental god. If it wasn't for the fact that Ainslow still had some rationality left in him and knew that Omdroken wouldn't be easy to deal with, Ainslow would have long since personally opened the seal to steal the earth elemental god's glory. Then, join us in our plan. This time, the fire elemental god, the water elemental god, and I have decided to join forces to completely destroy Omdroken. That's not enough. After a long period of hesitation, Ainslow gave such an answer. It wasn't that Ainslow wasn't willing, but rather that it wasn't enough. Ainslow didn't think that the Allied forces would be able to win. Cameron didn't get angry at being refused. This was an answer that he had expected. Omdurokun had offended far too many people, and this wasn't the first time that he had been attacked by the Allied forces. Yet he still lived so happily. This was for no other reason than that he was strong enough to fight against the other 3 Earth elemental gods at the same time. And in the underground labyrinth, Ainslow had even single-handedly controlled the Earth elemental dimensional door while dominating everyone else and even gaining the upper hand. If it wasn't for the fact that the Earth elemental dimensional door had a problem which greatly reduced the Earth elemental god's combat strength, it would have been hard to say who would have won or lost. In Ainslow's eyes, if she casually joined the Allied forces to attack Ainslow, it would be far too pitiful if all the Earth elemental dimensional door's existences ran away after suffering yet another defeat, leaving Ainslow behind to be dealt with by Omdurokun. Of course, we wouldn't be enough if Omdurokun was in perfect condition. But what if he's severely injured and even destroyed his divine soul? Don't you think it's strange? Even though he's already returned to the mortal plane for so long, he hasn't appeared even once. Nor is he like before, attacking the overly powerful Earth elemental lords like you in order to stabilize his position. Omdurokun was injured? Really? How was he injured? Were his injuries serious? Ainslow's series of hurried questions indicated that she was greatly tempted. Of course, I saw it with my own eyes. In fact, I even helped. In fact, the elemental heart in his body in the mortal plane became someone else's spoils of war. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the sudden opening of the underground tunnel was doubtlessly proof of everything. Let's talk inside. Ainslow even personally came out to greet him. However, unlike that deafening roar, Ainslow was an incredibly short elemental creature. Her ugly skin was covered in black scales, and her pitted head was filled with sharp elemental crystals. Her forelimbs were short, and she also had small, ugly eyes. Just judging from her physical appearance, she seemed rather similar to a gnome. However, Cameron wouldn't look down on her because of her physical appearance. Ainslow was the creator of all sorts of powerful elemental life forms, including tower giants. She was also known as the Great Stone Sculptor and was known as the Mother of all stones. That's right, it was her, not him. Elemental life forms didn't have a gender, but at a certain level, they could choose their gender. As one of the most ancient existences in all the elemental planes, Ainslow's reputation was no lower than that of the elemental gods. If it wasn't for the fact that Omdurokun was far too powerful, she would have had the right to become an elemental god as well. At the very least, if Ainslow had been a wind elemental creature, Cameron wouldn't have had any confidence in being able to suppress her. This time, our plan is truly grand. In order to ensure success, not only have the 2 elemental gods personally taken action, I've even found more than 30 elemental lords. They're all quite interested in this plan. Of course, their interest also includes the throne of the elemental god. As long as Omdurokun isn't in my way, I won't lose to anyone. Cameron smiled and didn't say anything else. This was already more than 30 times that he had heard something like this. Basically, every elemental lord would say something like this at least once. As long as Omdurokun isn't present, I'll personally obtain the throne of the elemental god. There were no promises. These ancient existences didn't need promises. They were all filled with confidence in themselves, and they knew that if Omdurokun collapsed, all promises would be useless. In the end, they would have to rely on their own strength. This was also why Roland had asked Cameron to personally come here to persuade them. Ordinary existences wouldn't even have a chance to speak in front of these ancient existences. Only the equally ancient wind elemental gods would know how to make these ancient existences work for the allied armies. In that case, please take a look at this blueprint. In order to deal with Omdurokun, we need a fortress, a gigantic moving fortress. Ainslow took the blueprint. I'm not very educated, so don't lie to me. Is this a fortress? Do you think that I've never been to the mortal plane before? This is obviously a duck. That's right. The blueprint depicted a large yellow duck without a neck. There were also several large words at the top of the blueprint. Moving fortress, yellow duck. It was evident that this was the design of a certain someone's blood, sweat, and tears. Fine, it wouldn't be wrong to say that it was a product of bad taste. No, 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 I didn't understand at first either. But look, the reason why it's made into a bird shape is to reduce air resistance when flying. The reason why we chose a strange duck shape with no feathers and no neck is to make it conform to the natural laws of airflow. It's said that this is the product of humanity's newest technology, airflow mechanics. It's the crystallization of the wise one's wisdom. Are you sure you're not joking? This is a product of the wise ones, not some random persons? Obviously, Ainslow wasn't so easily fooled. She had a premonition that if she did this just because of its strange and laughable appearance, it would become the greatest shame of her entire life. Of course, the person who gave me this blueprint was a great saint from the Truth Society, Marguerite. And this time, she'll be personally acting as well. All right, Cameron indeed hadn't played Ainslow. It was Roland who had played Cameron. But right now, the wind elemental god's words were quite convincing. Even though she still had many questions and doubts, Ainslow could only agree. Wake up all the stone sculptors and sculptors. We'll have work to do. Let's start making a yellow duck. With the great stone sculptor's creation, it shall become the greatest duck in the world. Chapter 213. Main God. Oh no, the system won't assign a mission that's certain death. I really wanted to say that, but in reality, I really didn't know how to earn 2,000 fate points in 24 hours. This was enough for me to do my daily work for half a year. But there's always a way out, and things finally took a turn for the better. I really wanted to say that, but that thing never came. Time's up. I'll be detaining your shear. Once you've collected enough points, come and redeem it from me. Every month, the interest will be 90%, and the interest will compound. If it drags on for too long, you understand. I know your sister. Haven't you had enough of this old joke? But even so, I was in a disadvantageous situation, so what else could I do? All I could do was hurry up and gather enough fate points to return. All right then, my current goal was to quickly complete the quest and make the most of the fate points I still owed. However, in my current condition, I was obviously not suited for challenging strong opponents. Therefore, he had no choice but to return less than a week later. I should hurry up and return to Caro. At the very least, I should think of a way to redeem my Choose one of the 2 daily missions. The first mission is to tell the world that I am the king of nudity. The second mission, Uncle is not a pervert. Little girl, watch Goldfish with Uncle. As I stroll through the streets of Caro, I looked at my daily quests. I was probably going to have to choose between scamming others or scamming myself. However, when I saw that the reward was only 50 fate points, I felt like it wasn't even enough to pay the interest, so I directly gave up. Is it profitable to disrupt the original trajectory and destiny? Let's go there and find an epic quest. I squatted on the street and looked down at the busy crowd, deep in thought. Roland, it really is you. When the sentinel said you were back, I couldn't believe it. All of a sudden, I was interrupted by an agitated, white-bearded head. Looking at the wrinkled, old face that was flushed with excitement, I tilted my head. Oh, you're the old man who sells beef patties in Oak Alley? He wants the 2 copper coins he owes me last time. Pooh! Judging from his posture and the ugly gazes of the 2 younger mages behind him, I should have guessed wrongly. Hotel owner? The shoemaker at the door? The hairdresser next door? None of them. Are you kidding me? Who are you? I was a little annoyed. I was making a few gold coins in a minute, and this white-bearded old man actually came over to play guessing with me. You can't recognize me, yet you're angry at me. I'm Cade, your junior from the same batch. Look carefully. Hearing that, I was stunned. There was indeed such a junior in my memory, but he obviously didn't look like this. That's not right. Cade doesn't have this much beard. He was a handsome boy back in the day, and he was clean and white. He wasn't as short as you are. The white-bearded old man quickly nodded. Yes, it's that clean and white Cade. Back in the day, I was a famous handsome boy, a famous mistress killer. But now that I'm getting older, how can I still be the same? My back is hunched, so of course I'm short. Are you really Cade? That Cade who specialized in prophecy? That Cade who flunked his elemental magic class to the point where the world was falling apart? That Cade who didn't wash his underwear for half a month? Cade, the one who used flame burst to confess his love, but ended up getting labeled as a younger brother. All right, the more I said, the redder Cade's old face became, but he didn't deny it. Yes, didn't I flunk my course together with you back in the day? You were the one who came up with the stupid idea of confessing in public. As for not washing his underwear for 10 days, you were the one who blew up the laundry room. I nodded. This was indeed correct, but I still needed to confirm it. You really are Cade, the Cade who chose to specialize in prophecy just to peek at female teachers changing and bathing. This time, it was the two students behind me who looked at their teacher with astonished expressions. In their eyes, the myth-ranked mage Cade was a well-respected, gentle, and amiable elder. They didn't expect him to have such an unofficial history. That's Phillips. You definitely remembered wrongly. I'm not interested in old women. I only like young girls. Oh. All right. It was too late to stop now. The students' jeering made the old mage want to find a hole to hide in. Now that I had confirmed it, I decided. You really are Cade? That's wonderful. Archmage Cade had a smile on his face and tears in his old eyes. It was indeed exciting to be able to see his old friend again after so many years. You bastard, pay me back. When are you going to pay me back the 3.5 gold coins you owe me? With interest added on for 200 years, I'll count it as 2 million gold coins. All right, everyone's expressions froze over at this moment. Demon God of the 9 hells, listen to my prayers. All right then, this guy actually started chanting an incantation. It seemed that it was a mega spell that borrowed the power of a demon god. I knew that things would get out of hand if things continued like this, so I laughed as I spoke. You went berserk with just a little provocation. It seems that it really is you, Cade. Come, let us brothers find a place to have a few drinks. There were 4 great joys in life: rain after a long drought, wedding night, and passing the exam, meeting an old friend in a foreign land. There were also 4 great tragedies in life. There was only 1 drop of rain, the groom wasn't you, the name was written on the wrong person, and meeting your creditor in a foreign land. But right now, Cade, who seemed to be in debt, was actually quite happy. After drinking some alcohol, he even proudly asked a little girl, "Do you want Grandpa to turn you into a Western lollipop? Look, little goldfish." Then, he was dragged away by his disciples, who risked their lives. Today, Cade's old-fashioned and serious image had been completely destroyed. Perhaps tomorrow, the old bastard Cade's fame would spread throughout the entire city. Oh my, even though it's clearly free alcohol, it's not bad at all. This should be a special 300-year-old brandy from the Ottoman Empire's Valon Corner region. The market price is at least 5,000 gold coins. Don't think that you can bribe me like this. You still have to pay me back my money. System notification. Can you not mention your 3.5 gold coins? Also, you remembered wrongly. Back then, you didn't even have any gold coins to use. It was clearly 3.5 copper coins. Learn from Cade. See, you've already forgotten about it, and you even agreed to pay for your food and lodging. Copper coins? Forget it. There's no difference. You can forget about the points I owe you, and I'll forget about it as well. All right then, the system didn't reply, but I guess that it was probably preparing to give me an honorary title of miser or something along those lines. At the same time, Cade walked over in high spirits. Yep, I probably had to ignore the small handprint on his face. It seemed that little girls didn't care if you were a well-respected archmage or not. Roland, why are you drinking by yourself? It's such a rare celebratory banquet, so be happy. This is also an occasion where I wanted to introduce you, an old upperclassman, to them. At least give me some face. Don't mention it. Just look at how they're pointing at me. Don't even mention face. In their eyes, I'm already an old monster. You don't say. It's really strange. Although it's said that after reaching a certain level, your physical body will gradually become immortal and your aging will slow down. Not to mention your physical body, I feel like even your soul is filled with energy. You're just like a newborn baby. However, your current magic power isn't that strong. I chuckled, but didn't reply. There were some things that I couldn't explain even if I wanted to. Cade knew that I didn't want to talk about it, so he shook his head and didn't press me for more details. Do you still remember Elulalu? She actually got married to Casso. Our generation. I'd already forgotten many things, but fortunately, during the last god's descent, many of my lost memories that could be restored were restored by divine power. Plus, the records of my diary basically matched up. Of course, some confusion was unavoidable, such as mistaking a beautiful woman as a handsome man, mistaking owing money as borrowing money, mistaking gold coins as copper coins. System. Can you not mention those 3.5 gold coins? Cough. Getting back to the main topic. As I got older, I would always become sentimental and naggy when talking about the past. We chatted for half the night, and I expected that apart from the few of us, everyone else had left. After hearing so many things, even I couldn't help but feel sentimental when I heard about my former classmates and friends. Time was merciless, and the years didn't stop. More than 200 years had passed, and there weren't many of my former classmates who were still alive. After all, there was a barrier between gold, legend, and saint rank. If one wanted to reach the limits of a normal life, they would need to reach saint rank at the very least, and the probability of that was so low that it was negligible. Right. Do you still remember Teacher Amelia? Cade smiled mysteriously, as if he had finally grasped my sore spot. Back when you got together with her, many archmages were heartbroken, and many used your portrait as a scarecrow. She's still looking for you, and she doesn't believe that you're already dead. She's always been single, and it seems that she's deeply in love with you. How do you intend to repay her? I didn't have anything to say, but Aditya and Sorrento had shocked expressions and exclaimed in surprise. They had always been worried that their teacher would continue to make a fool of herself, but they never expected to hear such shocking news. Impossible! The gentle and kind Teacher Amelia is the dream lover of countless students. How could she? I remember 1047 of the Angel Amelia's fan club. This definitely can't be true. Teacher, you're going against us countless Amelia fans. Asterisk slap. Asterisk, I slapped the back of the heads of the two acolytes, telling them to shut up. Only then did Cade awkwardly smile at me. You're actually fooled by appearances. How useless. After those taboo matters were exposed, Amelia's reputation was indeed ruined. But 200 years had passed, and as long as those old fellows exposed her and gossiped about her, there wouldn't be many who knew about Amelia's past anymore. In their eyes, there was probably only that astonishingly charismatic yet approachable and gentle teacher. Back then, who was it that hugged my leg and cried, and then ran away crying while shouting, "I'll leave Her Highness Amelia to you, and you must treat her well, or I'll never forgive you for the rest of my life." This time, it was Cade's turn to sweat. The next moment, he smoothed his beard and spoke in a serious tone. "It's Ari Bald. It's definitely that guy. Back in the day, that guy really chased after Amelia." All right then, seeing that this was a 300-year-old brandy, I'll give you some face. So, even Teacher had a past like that. Why do you say that we're fooled by appearances? Could it be that Teacher Amelia has another side to her? A wild side? A charming side? I really want to see it. One of them sighed, while the other was panting heavily. It was obvious that none of these guys were normal people. Cade and I exchanged glances and smiled wryly at the same time when faced with the next generation's infatuation with Amelia. It seemed that we had also been fooled in the same way back in the day. Wild? Should I say crazy? Believe me, if you really saw that side, it would most likely be on a test bench, and later, there would be no later. After hesitating for a moment, I finally said it out loud. Actually, Amelia found me, and this time, we came together. Teacher Heloise also came with us. The moment I said this, old Cade was still fine, but the other two Amelia fans were about to pounce on me with bloodshot eyes. However, Cade revealed a contemplative expression. The Earth Elemental Plane wasn't a good place to have a honeymoon. These three people would be world-class calamities if they left, so they definitely had some ulterior motive for coming here. Cade then thought about all the strange things that had been happening recently and had an expression of sudden realization. Could it be that the Earth Elemental Tide's recent explosion and the inability to teleport between planes was also caused by you guys? Teleportation between planes is impossible? No, it wasn't done by us, but it's highly likely related to our goal. You know about Unbroken, right? Only he, the Earth Elemental God, will be able to seal off this plane. He's definitely the one who caused the elemental storm's explosion. Unbroken? Didn't the most recent news say that he went to the Northlands to be with the Beastmen? Your information is delayed by at least half a year. He's back, and he's seriously injured. This time, we're here to do something big. Do you want to come with us? Congratulations to my host for triggering a legendary level quest. System notification. I'm not giving you a quest to help you pay off your debt because I pity you. Stop acting cute. You're not cute at all. Chapter 214. To be honest, meeting an old friend in a foreign land was quite a joyous occasion, especially when they owed me money and even promised to pay me back with interest. System. That's enough of this joke. Are you done yet? Cough. Getting back to the main topic, I finally didn't have to trick those gnomes to earn my living expenses, which saved me quite a bit of effort. After all, those gnomes weren't easy to deal with, and they weren't easy to deal with. However, their hard work resulted in another effect. The god of law, Wumian's faith, spread far and wide. Of course, it was impossible to count on them to proactively spread the concept of law. Even if the Church of Law, which strictly prohibited crimes, was very helpful to the weak gnomes, they were willing to do anything for the sake of money. They had been walking on the border between legal and illegal for a long time, so why would they actively seek trouble for themselves? What they spread was another Church of Law that belonged to Wumian's contract. This divine concept obtained from the Ottoman Empire hadn't even been accepted by human society yet, but the gnomes were already openly using it. That insurance was obviously a type of contract, and the protection of the weak and the recognition of contracts by a true god made the gnomes exceptionally welcome this new concept. There was just a small problem. Venerable insurance god, Sleepless, please listen to my prayer and allow me to sell a few more insurance policies today. Fine, forget about getting the god's name wrong. The insurance god wasn't the god of commerce, so why would he bless you with a smooth business? Cough wrong. What did this insurance god mean? He actually didn't send down any divine punishment? Could it be that Wumian's was a forgiving god? That was impossible. Fortunately, I got the wrong god's name wrong, so my prayer was ineffective. Otherwise, fine, someone had already told the truth. Praying with the wrong god's name was like calling the wrong number. Of course, it was meaningless, but it would definitely anger any divine job class member who saw such blasphemy. But sometimes, the fake could also be mistaken for the real. Some wrong concepts, when combined to a certain extent, could really affect the concept of a true god. In order to not be called the insurance god, Sleepless, such a weak name, I intended to have the Church of Law take action the moment I returned. At the very least, I couldn't let the gnomes do as they pleased. Perhaps I could try to get involved in such a profitable business like insurance. But now, this contract with the god of law inscribed on it was doubtlessly far more useful than the devil's contract. And in order to make these contracts even more effective, those stingy misers actually built a church dedicated to the god of law in Cairo. Wumian's statue was even made of gold. Yep, it was just gold paint. They wouldn't be willing to use the lovely gold to make useless decorations. Although I was rather dissatisfied with the fact that more and more goblins were treating the god of insurance, I had to admit that the god of law had indeed expanded the god of law's divine concept and divine domain as they spread new contracts such as insurance. It could be said that they were doing a great deed out of selfishness. Perhaps I should discuss it with the gnomes and come up with a contract with them for a wholesale price, with an additional condition for them to spread the complete teachings of the god of law. With their ability to expand their business to other dimensions, it should be quite effective. As I pondered, a scene suddenly appeared before my eyes. A goblin wearing a suit and a gentleman's hat knocked on my door politely and handed me a name card. Excuse me, do you know Wumian's? You don't? That's great. Oh no, it's such a pity. Our Church of Wumian's, if you join us now, we'll even give you a 3-year insurance policy. If you add 100 gold coins, we'll even help you apply for a VIP membership card and upgrade your insurance policy to explosive accident for free. I thought about how, if this frightening scene came true, the Church of Law's divine job class members would probably be the same as the ubiquitous insurance salesman. In order to prevent Wummy Ann's from being treated as the god of advertising, I immediately decided to give up on this idea. But the most important thing right now was still, when will the world be returned to me? I did activate a legendary quest, which would definitely give me a lot of points. But unexpectedly, it wasn't to kill the earth elemental god Omdarokin. Instead, it was an entanglement of two dragons mission that require me to choose between the Bardi Empire and the Mage Country in order to increase my reputation as much as possible. Obviously, if I chose the Mage Country and dragged them down with me, it would naturally be a good thing for me to increase my reputation in this battle against Omdarokin. The reward I received was a large number of points that I needed the most. If I chose to kill Omdarokin in order to increase my reputation, I would also receive plenty of earth elemental materials to construct my perfect world as spoils of war. However, I wasn't happy at all because this legendary quest was obviously hinting at something. The Mage Country and the Bardi Empire are at war? Cade nodded with a bitter expression upon hearing this. Although there's no full-scale war yet, there have been over 100 skirmishes at the border in the past month. We capture several hundred spies every day, and it's quite obvious that the enemy's armies are gathering. It would seem that it's only a matter of time before the Bardi Empire declares war. Just what is that Orlos the 13th thinking? He's actually trying to start a war between the mega empires right before the Holy War? Did a demon eat his brain? I didn't even need to ask for the reason, as I had some understanding of the Truth Symposium. As long as the general structure of the Truth Symposium didn't change, the Mage Country's rulers would have no interest in territory or reputation. The Mage Country hadn't changed its territory for several millennia already, so it was almost impossible for them to start a war. As for the Bardi Empire, actually all the human mega-empires were basically the same. It was only natural for them to be arrogant. If a lunatic who thought that he was the greatest emperor of all time appeared, the neighboring countries would have to struggle for several hundred years. And it just so happened that all the mega-empires had quite a solid foundation, so it was quite troublesome to struggle for them. Fortunately, there were still smaller countries between the mega-empires as a buffer zone. However, I had heard of Orlos before. He had already been in power for more than 30 years, and he had always been a staunch hawk. He had fought against numerous foreign countries, and recently, he had even forced the 13 countries of the Moonhorn Alliance to surrender, which directly tore apart the buffer zone between the Bardi Empire and the Mage Country. I don't think he's crazy. He probably saw that the other countries were busy during the Holy War, so he could use this time to expand. Do they really think that they can escape? How foolish. Cade shook his head. The Bardi Empire is a landlocked country. There aren't any other species within or outside its borders. I'm afraid that they really won't be involved in this holy war. Our Mage Country has expanded far too much. I'm guessing that they're here for our technology. This will be quite troublesome. I opened my mouth, but in the end, I didn't say anything. After all, it was impossible for me to explain the information that the undead plane just so happened to be in the Bardi Empire's capital. If I casually said something like that, there would be no end of trouble. Not only that, I wouldn't be able to verify whether history and future would really coincide. Something worth mentioning was that when I told Renee to use the name of the Donlon Principality to spread the news that the undead were about to invade the Bardi Empire, basically nobody believed me. In fact, there was quite a bit of ridicule and criticism. The Northerners are saying that the undead calamity is about to arrive? Haha, it would seem that they've been scared witless by the remnants of Shilua's army. Let the undead calamity come. The Yongye calamity that has existed for more than 100 years hasn't been able to do anything to us. Not to mention today, the Donlon Principality, the legendary Roland Principality. He's here to warn us of a new Yongye calamity. Oh my, isn't this just a mouse warning us that the granaries are unsafe? Are you sure you're not joking? All right then, I had done everything I could. I couldn't care less if you listened or not. But now, it was obvious that I had to make a choice. There's no need to think about the mage country anymore. I already deeply hate that idiotic bastard emperor. And when I made my choice, that damn system actually gave me a benefit, allowing me to temporarily borrow my world 3 times. It even gave me a progress bar. 11, 7%, minus 3,421. The second progress bar was a completely random increase in debt, while the first progress bar was incomprehensible. But no matter how I asked, my system would fall into a strange silence. And every time the progress bar increased by a little, my debt would skyrocket. This was completely different from how it was calculated. I could only helplessly try using my world once, and I instantly understood. Then, I instantly regretted it. I had wasted a rare opportunity. My world was still empty, and the air was still as cold as ever. However, there was something more to it than before. At the very least, it was much more stable than before. Has my system changed? Is it intending to go down that sunder a path? It actually really helped me out. If my guess is correct, it's helping me stabilize and perfect my world. And it's even making me write an IOU. My system was quite reliable when it came to accepting money to do things. It would never work for free and would always adhere to its basic principle of not doing anything without accepting money and doing as much as it received. This time, it was rather surprising that it was willing to go into debt to help me. My system had fallen into an abnormal state of stagnation. Not only did it ignore my questions, it was also impossible to open anything apart from the progress bar. It was just like a computer that had crashed due to being overloaded. But from another perspective, this was proof of how important my world was. It was so important that my system was willing to give up everything and pour all its power into perfecting it. But just because I was unable to use my system didn't mean that I had nothing else to do. In fact, in order to improve my reputation and adapt to future battles, I have been doing many small things recently. Karo's arena was usually a place where other species would settle their personal grudges. Wise, mages would never like a barbarian's arena. But these days, the arena was filled to the brim with mages. Right now, a battle between a silver-armored warrior and an archmage was underway in the arena. The archmage kept constructing walls in an attempt to prevent the warrior from getting close to him, while the earth elemental warrior that was being controlled was also acting as a barrier. Asterisk smack. Asterisk the earth wall that was strong enough to block giants was actually smashed apart. The warrior only lowered his head and raised his shield to protect his head, completely ignoring the secondary earth elemental summoned by his opponent. Asterisk boom. Asterisk this time, the earth elemental energy in the newly erected earth wall wasn't solid enough yet, so it was actually smashed through. The archmage was caught off guard and was still in the middle of chanting his incantation when a sharp sword arrived in front of him. The mage was so scared that his face was pale as he hurriedly raised his hands to surrender. Victor, Roland, congratulations on your 17 consecutive victories. I took off my helmet and smiled in a rather rusty 59 style, Holy Knight style, as I waved at the spectators. This immediately caused even more cheers. It would seem that I'm still as good as ever. As a Holy Knight who used to act as a front and attract sponsors, I was quite skilled at using my face to increase my reputation. But that alone still wasn't enough. And so I smiled as I extended my hand to the loser, pulled him up, and began explaining the battle just now. Using an earth wall trap that's been lying in ambush to block high-speed warriors is indeed a good idea, but sometimes it's too obvious. Just now, if you had placed a small tripping trap under the earth wall, as long as the opponent loses his balance, even if it's only for an instant, it would have been enough to kill him. Besides, you only care about the wall. Couldn't you have dug a pit behind the wall? As long as you block the opponent's line of sight, it's highly likely that a high-speed warrior would directly fall into the pit the moment he rushes past the earth wall or over it. Oh, not only was the mage nodding his head in gratitude, the other spectating mages also took out their notebooks and kept taking notes. Such small combat techniques and practical experience would be impossible to teach in any classroom, since they were combat experience for powerful warriors. Academic mages have a bad habit. They always like to use extravagant high-level spells to crush their opponents. Actually, high-level spells are far too slow and obvious to cast, so they aren't much of a threat to experienced high-level warriors. As long as they're hit in a critical spot, a small ice arrow will be enough to kill them. Simple low-level spells are the best combination to deal with high-level warriors. Yep, these were all training battles, as well as my attempt to increase my reputation. After all, in the world of mages, there were plenty of mages who could impart magical knowledge, but there were pitifully few mages who could impart combat experience and practical techniques. Yep, mages. Although they all acted as combat job classes in battle, I faced them as a magic swordsman who also practiced swordsmanship. This was also the main reason why they were willing to accept me. Since it was also a training battle between mages, they could accept losing, but if warriors constantly defeated mages, it would doubtlessly cause unnecessary trouble. As their highest-ranked archmage, Cade's senior apprentice, I naturally counted as their teacher as well, which greatly reduced their hostility toward me. And since I was an ancient monster who had lived for several hundred years, no matter how ridiculous my behavior was, they would still treat me as normal. May the holy light's favor forever be by your side. A glorious holy light descended, and the defeated mage's wounds began to heal. Even his skin began to glow a pinkish red. However, the others didn't have any reactions. After all, this wasn't the first time this had happened. 13 holy treatments. Could it be that this lord is also a legend-ranked holy knight? Inconceivable. Doubtlessly, having a good reputation as a holy knight would make it much easier for me to increase my reputation. At the very least, everyone took my random stories of adventure seriously. While the others only had expressions of astonishment at the start, Cade was so shocked that his jaw nearly fell off. The greedy, perverted, petty, cunning, and vengeful Roland was actually able to become a holy knight? Could it be that the rumors that the god of holy light has gone blind are true? All right then, I'm greedy, perverted, and vengeful. Yep, Cade, you brat, remember it well. Yep, in 2 days I'll show you just how vengeful I am. Thanks for your hard work. Those brats are finally convinced. Cade, keep being happy. I'll help you spread the name of being a Lullicon throughout the entire city. I wanted to tease him a little more, but suddenly, a galloping horse brought me a messenger. Judging from how the messenger waved at me, the letter I had been waiting for all this time had finally arrived. Cade, it seems that it's time for our plan to begin. Chapter 2:15. Caro's sky was always grayish-yellow. Every day, an endless sandstorm would attack the city's sky barrier. Although it wasn't as windproof as the outside world, it was only natural that the sky inside the city would be pitch black whenever the sandstorm started. Every time this happened, the city's magical lights would be lit up. But since Caro had recently been cut off from the mortal plane, resources and supplies were limited, and magical lights were a luxury that consumed a lot of energy. Whenever the sandstorm started, the entire city would be pitch black, so everyone would have to stay indoors and sleep. And this was only a small part of the harsh environment. The lack of color made this world seem rather monotonous. In order to avoid psychological problems, according to past conventions, Caro's resident mages would usually be rotated out every 3 years. But this unexpected situation meant that Cade, who was about to leave his post, would have to stay here for a very long time. And right now, in this world that was mainly black, gray, and yellow, a different color had appeared. It was an endless expanse of white. My temporary guest room had been completely frozen over by ice. Ice crystals spread all the way down the corridor, and when the ice gathered together, there was an empty space where the Ice Knight was currently restraining his chill. Phew, I've finally gotten used to it. The death chill that I've just learned is indeed much more useful than freeze. Now then, let's move on to my next target, the Ice Sword. Of course, I wouldn't spar with Cade for free. To be honest, I really needed a lot of actual combat to familiarize myself with my new abilities. Although my system had sent my frigid winter earth back into my furnace for maintenance, making most of its power unusable, there were still 2 advanced abilities that had evolved from my original abilities. Just completely mastering these 2 abilities took up a lot of my time and effort. Freeze had only just awakened, but that already proved its potential. Its limitless overlay and unavoidable abilities were the same as Frigid Winter's original form. However, the fact that it could only be added upon contact was still a major flaw. Back then, I had left a note that I would be able to evolve it again once I reached the gold rank. Now, as expected, it had evolved again. Death Chill was a strange ability that dealt ice damage in an area. Not only that, every ice damage would decrease the enemy's resistance to ice. I had tested it before, and if a gold rank mage wasn't on guard, they would probably fall asleep in an ice cube within 30 seconds. This overlay inherited Freeze has unavoidable and limitless overlay effect. Simply speaking, as long as I dragged it out long enough, I was confident that I could freeze even an ice dragon. And since this ability was directly connected to my Frigid Winter Earth, I estimated that even a true god would be unable to resist this seemingly low damage freezing effect. This was doubtlessly an incredibly powerful ability. It was likely that it would become the core of my future battle strategies. As long as I wore heavy armor, I was already an outstanding Can Knight. Not to mention, I also had support abilities like Holy Healing, which would make me an obvious advantage in a battle of attrition. My recent fights with other mages doubtlessly proved just how strange and powerful this ability was. When moving, my opponent's feet would suddenly slip or freeze. When chanting an incantation halfway, I would suddenly be interrupted by a cough. My well-prepared defensive barrier would become a useless and fragile block of ice. This was an even more obvious advantage when fighting against an opponent who was also a melee combatant. The closer I got, the more powerful this death chill would be. When two swords clashed, the opponent would have to worry about the ice crystals on their swords. Of course, the death chill wouldn't let the sword wielder go. Although I still needed to discover more uses for this ability, just this ability alone was enough for me to deal with any ordinary legend. The most important part was that this ability wouldn't be affected by the environment of this world. If it could be used even in the earth elemental plane, where water and ice elements were scarce, then it was likely that even the gods would be able to use it in their personal domains. That was what I was most concerned about. However, there were some people who didn't like me. Hey, weren't you the one who said that warriors were all brainless muscleheads? Why did you go into the barbarian job class all by yourself? All right then, having an old friend who knew everything about you was quite frustrating, especially when he knew your dark history like the back of his hand. However, I really didn't know how to respond to such a ridiculing question. It's a long story, right? Did the barbarian empire reply? Yep, they barely managed to contact them. Although they could only say a few words, the Truth Symposium responded quite quickly and gave us some good news. Basically, they gave us full authority to deal with any sudden situations. Basically, I have the final say. Kate smiled proudly. From a certain standpoint, this also showed how much the Barbarian Empire and the Truth Symposium trusted and valued him. This was to be expected. I nodded and didn't say anything. However, Cade then chuckled. While we're at it, they also brought something with them. A small gift for you. A gift for me? Back then, I should have left without saying goodbye. Before I left, I reported Amelia and hurriedly ran away. How could there be a gift for me? It's your graduation certificate. Congratulations. After more than 200 years, you're finally the first graduate to have a certificate and be able to find a job. By the way, you've also broken the history of staying the longest in school and playing truant. All right then, Roland's name was actually written on that little blue booklet, and it even had the Truth Symposium seal on it. I was both angry and amused at first, but then I came to a sudden realization. You're saying some things only need to be known in your heart. There's no need to say it out loud. By the way, remember to thank our teacher Aloso. He even helped you become a special lecturer. This seemed like an insignificant joke, but it represented the mage country's acknowledgement of me. At the very least, I would no longer be an outsider to the mage country. Now that I had the status of a special lecturer who graduated from the mage country, I also had the status of a member of the mage country. It would only be natural for me to command these juniors of mine. Teacher Aloso? That nice guy from the ice element? Yep, I got it. In return, I'll give him a copy of the principles behind Ice Aeon. Yonya, so it really was you. Forget it. Everyone has their own troubles, so I won't mention it. Then, I'll thank you on behalf of Teacher Aloso. After all, this is the only ice element forbidden spell in the past 300 years. Although 99% of people won't be able to learn it, it's still good to enrich our library. After the Mage Country sent out the news, all of Cairo became busy preparing for war. The conflict between the Mage Country and the Bardi Empire involved every mage's thoughts. Everyone's goal was to quickly resolve the current problem and return to the Mage Country. Since Cairo began taking action, the Shadow Tower, Hand of Tiso, and other factions that were on good terms with the Mage Country also accepted the invitation to join the Mage Country in preparing for war. As for me, I patiently waited for this fated battle. Omdaroken, the blood feud with Red Maple City, is still fresh in our minds. It's time to settle the score. From a certain standpoint, the elemental god of an elemental plane was also the master of this plane. Countless elemental creatures would be under his control. Only extremely powerful elemental creatures would be able to refuse his summons. That was why this was going to be an incredibly dangerous battle from the very start. That was why we needed to prepare a sufficient amount of cannon fodder in order to deal with the elemental gods' nearly limitless number of cannon fodder elemental warriors. Every member of our small team had been working hard since the very beginning. Ordinary wind and water elemental creatures were probably nothing more than trash here. That was why Cambrian had been doing his best to trick the Mage Country's residents into becoming cannon fodder. The ambitious ancient existences had long since been dissatisfied with Omdaroken, especially since he had been sealed away for such a long time and hadn't shown himself after returning. Now, there were even rumors that he was seriously injured and on the verge of death. Naturally, Omdaroken wasn't much of a threat. The new generation of Earth Elemental Lords were quite ambitious and had long since wanted to replace Omdaroken. The older generation of Earth Elemental Lords didn't dare to underestimate Omdaroken at all. However, the more they learned about how powerful Omdaroken was, the more they didn't want to miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity when they learned that Omdaroken was seriously injured. Later on, Cambrian no longer needed to act as a lobbyist. The Earth Elemental Lords and Earth Elemental Lords formed their own factions, and their numbers had reached the limit. The Earth Elemental God, who normally didn't do much good, was now facing the threat of being impeached by his citizens due to his absence for several thousand years. On the other hand, Renee was also working hard in her own way. The endless demon army was gathering more and more, becoming a major threat to the mortal plane. If it wasn't for the fact that the Earth Elemental Lords wanted to take care of Omdaroken first, the allied army would likely immediately turn around and attack this demon lord who was acting so recklessly. As for the two semi-god mages in my small team, they didn't relax at all. They didn't even know that there was an endless supply of cannon fodder. They simply carried out their own duties. The countless rune giants and earth-type magical plants had already accumulated into a mountain. Plus, the allied army of outsiders had already arrived. It was likely that Omdaroken was going to be in big trouble this time. Meanwhile, Omdaroken's side was completely silent. Although it was possible to sense that the mountains and rocks were trembling slightly, as if some terrifying existence was breathing and growing stronger. Apart from that, there were no other signs of movement. No Earth Elemental Lords were summoned. In fact, Omdaroken himself wasn't moving at all, as if he was still in a deep sleep. Oh my, Roland really knows how to order people around. He actually made us act as scouts. Still, it's doubtlessly a good thing to be able to see such a situation. It would seem that our chances of victory have increased. Before I even finished speaking, Marguerite and Adam disappeared without a trace. It was no wonder that they were sent to act as scouts. Adam was the strongest shield in the world, and Marguerite had teleportation and defensive abilities. Even if they faced Omdaroken, they would still be able to escape unscathed. Omdaroken being unprepared was completely within expectations. For an elemental god, just the destruction of his physical body would be enough to send him into a long hibernation. And in order to vent his anger, he used his divine soul to cast 2 forbidden spells. The first spell destroyed Red Maple City's city walls, while the second spell provided the plane's beastmen with terrain to attack. His actions had indeed changed the entire battle situation. However, he didn't even have a physical body at that time, which meant that he had self-destructed his divine soul, paying a tremendous price. It was likely that he wouldn't be able to recover without several hundred or even several thousand years of hibernation. In his eyes, this single attack should have been enough to secure victory. However, he never expected that the beastmen would still be defeated in the end. And when his weakened divine soul returned to the earth elemental plane, he didn't even dare to appear in front of the other elemental lords. He directly returned to his home to hibernate. Without a doubt, this was the correct choice. Perhaps as long as he hibernated for a period of time, he would be able to use the earth elemental plane's endless supply of energy to him, and he would be able to once again have the ability to protect himself. This was obviously better than appearing in a weakened state and letting those ambitious earth elemental lords discover his weakness. The only thing that he hadn't miscalculated was that his earth elemental lords viewed him with far too much importance. They were willing to abandon what they were doing in order to eliminate any future threats at all costs. In the end, because he had hibernated, he had lost the initiative. There was only half a month left until the 2-month deadline. This faintly discernible anti-Islamic Androkan army had already gathered nearly half of the Earth elemental plane's combat strength. Not only would they have an endless supply of cannon fodder, they would also have no lack of high-level combat strength. As I said, with so many people, what's the point of talking about tactics? Just a +1 will be enough. However, this was more to encourage the army's morale than anything else. After all, even if we had the combat strength of a small half of the Earth elemental plane, Androkan would have the combat strength of an entire Earth elemental plane. As the ruler of this elemental plane, the elemental god could use the elemental power of this plane as he pleased. It was as if the entire plane was his divine domain. In his own territory, he wouldn't be any weaker than a mid-level true god. He was definitely much stronger than Felix had been in the past. If it wasn't for the fact that Androkan had been so heavily injured in the mortal plane, those experienced elemental lords wouldn't have had the courage to rebel against Androkan at all. And if they missed out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, it would be highly unlikely that there would be another. However, no one would know just how powerful an elemental god would be in their home turf unless they actually fought. After all, the earliest elemental gods would be replaced was 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. It would be very difficult to find recent battle records. Ask the water elemental god and the wind elemental god. It was a good idea, but it wasn't very realistic. In fact, he had already asked before they parted ways, but the other party had remained strangely silent. It was obvious that the other party had no intention of revealing his trump card. Today is the Earth Elemental God's turn. Are you worried that it'll be your turn tomorrow? He's quite careful. We were enemies to begin with, and now we were in a temporary alliance against a common enemy. I wasn't confident that we wouldn't turn on each other tomorrow. It was quite reasonable for him to be so cautious. I was also hiding most of my abilities, so it was only natural that I wouldn't be able to say anything about it. Actually, due to our different elemental elements, our fighting styles are completely different. It's impossible to provide any valuable information to begin with. Not to mention that Androkan's power level and history are far above ours, so it's even more impossible to use him as a reference. In that case, rather than providing false information that will cause miscalculations, it's better to not say anything at all. This excuse sounded very reasonable, but if I believed it, I would really be a fool. However, as a reason for both sides to take a step back, it was not a bad idea. As the countdown to February drew closer and closer, I finally received some good news. Heloise has woken up? That's wonderful. Why did I always seem to forget someone? No, definitely not. You insist that you do? Fine then, you ask for it. Let's see what that existence, whose name had become a forbidden word, has been busy with recently. In a distant sand source, a draken wearing only a tattered piece of cloth was currently sitting cross-legged and smiling. All sorts of creatures were gathered around him, including stone giants, sandworms, golden sphinxes, and so on. All sorts of creatures that had been enemies with each other were now sitting together. Of course, the only person capable of such a miraculous feat was the Draken currently teaching. All appearances are nothing more than hypocrisy. Appearance is emptiness. Emptiness is appearance. Life is created by oneself, and appearances are born from the heart. Everything in the world is an illusion. All of you hate each other and kill each other just because of some minor differences. You've already become obsessed with appearances. All are equal, and true love knows no boundaries. Perhaps you're of different species and genders, but as long as you have a heart that pursues true love, you're all brothers and sisters at the root. There's nothing different about you. The legend-ranked Draken was currently teaching his path of true love to the residents of another dimension. After his words, brainwashing, more and more elemental creatures began following him, searching for a path of coexistence that didn't belong to this dimension. I feel that all bodies are suffering, so I hereby swear that I'm willing to go to the ends of the earth and promote the path of true love. I'm willing for all living creatures in the world to abandon their prejudices and ignore race, gender, and appearance to pursue true love. I'm willing to be struck by 9 bolts of lightning to test my willpower, to prove my sincerity. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the Draken had just said that he was willing to be struck by lightning to test his willpower when the lightning bolt descended. However, it was unknown if the Draken was testing him or simply disliked him and wanted to strike him to death with lightning. This sudden violent lightning bolt caused his disciples to exclaim in surprise. It was quite rare to encounter lightning in the earth elemental plane, and this overflowing lightning element was doubtlessly the best evidence that this was true lightning. The other creatures still intended to save Beifong, but suddenly, Beifong's charred skin fell off, revealing new skin underneath. Beifong had been struck by lightning, yet he was still completely unharmed. Instead, he revealed his signature smile. As everyone can see with your own eyes, our sincerity has moved the heavens, sending down lightning to test us. Beifong had just shouted out righteously. The dark clouds that continued to surround him doubtlessly meant that this 9 bolts of lightning were only the beginning. His lightning tribulation hadn't ended yet. His disciples first had expressions of fear as they tried to hide. However, they calmed down when they saw Beifong smiling, as if he didn't care at all. The surrounding creatures all had pious expressions as they bowed to him in a low voice. However, only Beifong himself knew that it wasn't that he didn't want to run, it was that he couldn't run. I've been sitting for too long. My feet are numb. After being struck by lightning just now, they're all numb to the point where I can't move. The smile on my face has also frozen. Can I take back what I just said? Asterisk boom. Asterisk, all right then. The heavens used their own method to answer him. The residents of the plains enjoyed this super lightning storm that was rarely seen in 1,000 years. It was said that thousands of bolts of lightning tore through the sky that day, breaking the highest record in the history of the Earth elemental plane. The most speechless part was that this miracle became one of the miracles of this abnormal religion. From then on, this abnormal religion and philosophy began to take root. Chapter 216. As expected of the mage country, it's even more ridiculous than before. This was a sea of books. Countless ancient books filled countless bookshelves, and every single one of them was a priceless magical book. The secrets and knowledge sealed within were enough to make anyone go crazy. After obtaining the status of a lecturer in the mage country, I also obtained the right to enter this library. In this world, books were the most precious wealth. Reading books was also a luxurious enjoyment. Back in the day, we had spent a lot of effort just to obtain a library reading permit from the Tassel Kingdom. However, the mage country was much more generous in this aspect. Even with Cade's recommendation, I was able to read these precious ancient books. This also proved that the mage country's foundational goal was to record and spread all magical knowledge. They needed all the mysteries and truths in the world. The title of Truth Overseer, which represented the highest authority in the mage country, explained everything. A mage's goal would forever be to obtain more knowledge and truth. The highest rank only meant that they occupied a higher position in the endless sea of knowledge. Of course, this was only the ideal mage. In reality, there were plenty of mages who were tempted by all sorts of things. After all, it was far too easy to use power that they had already obtained in exchange for authority and money in the mortal world. Some mages had even come for authority from the very start. They would naturally leave once they reached a certain level of cultivation. But right now, I didn't have the time to sigh about this. I was already spending most of my time studying these magical books. However, there were far more books than I had expected, and many of them were covered in a thick layer of dust. It would seem that no one had opened them for a very long time. It was evident that these books lacked proper management, and it was quite difficult to find them. It was likely that I wouldn't be able to successfully finish them. At this moment, the uninvited guests further slowed down my work. What a pity! Aston, Fimir, and Ibot could have been even more powerful. When old classmates met, it was inevitable that they would talk about their former classmates' whereabouts. However, they would always end with such a sentence, lamenting the death of an old classmate. It was inevitable that they would sigh and feel pity. For high-level mages, extending their lifespan wasn't a problem. It was possible to transform into an artificial life form, a half-elemental creature, a god envoy, and so on. Even if they were unlucky, transforming into an undead like a lich was also an option. Of course, the prerequisite was that one had to be strong enough. Those who were destined to be unable to reach the undying level weren't even considered in the first place. What made me sigh and feel pity was that those existences that should have reached the undying realm always died, due to mysterious reasons. Some time ago, there was an investigative academic magazine that did a survey and statistics on the causes of death of high-level mages. It was shocking. Among them, the leading cause of death was death in battle, accounting for at least 71%. The second leading cause was death from natural causes such as old age and illness, accounting for only 11%. The third leading cause was accidental, experimental deaths. Most of the talented mages were dragged into conflicts due to interests, wars, or personal grudges. In the end, they lost their lives, and their dreams and pursuits turned into bubbles. Cade felt some regret, as well as rejoiced for the geniuses who had perished. Cade's talent was clearly below average among his peers, but because he didn't like competition, he always shut himself away to research his own research. Yet, he had unknowingly reached the peak. The geniuses who fought would end up with nothing, while the mediocre who didn't fight would know their own limits and live their own lives. But as time passed, they would end up with everything. From a certain standpoint, this was doubtlessly a wonderful irony. For the great majority of mages who gave up on the path to power, what stopped them from climbing to the peak wasn't their own weaknesses, but rather the temptations and troubles of the outside world. By the way, are you really not mocking me? Why did I feel like the meaning behind his words was becoming more and more familiar? I seem to have died several times already, and I was constantly involved in the mortal world for certain reasons. But Cade laughed when he heard this. What kind of genius are you? Apart from getting full marks in an elective class like Mage Self-Defense, you're a genius that's hovering around the passing mark in everything else? You even had to retake a foundational class like Elemental Concepts 4 times. If it wasn't for the fact that you hooked up with a few female teachers back then, you probably would have been expelled long ago. Hearing this, I was immediately annoyed. As expected, childhood friends in real life weren't cute at all, especially those of the same gender who knew their dark histories. They should all be tied to goblin rockets and sent to the moon. I was actually quite happy to have you back then. At the very least, our class's average scores were much lower, and I didn't have to worry about getting last. All right then, the second-to-last and first-to-last students were sighing about how time passed and how heartless fate was. Those geniuses had already died, which made the irony even stronger. Don't say that. You're making it sound like I'm living off a woman. Hey, why are you looking at me with such a shocked expression? Be careful that I don't turn on you. You actually don't have any self-awareness? Roland, who only has his face, and Holy Knight, who chose the wrong path, were quite famous back in the day. You have no idea how many people bought your portrait and made you into a scarecrow after you hooked up with Teacher Heloise and then Teacher Amelia. You seem to know quite a bit. I clench my fists. This was a clear warning, but Kate still didn't seem to notice at all. Of course, back then, this was my main source of living expenses. There were quite a few tricks involved. Just drawing a likeness wasn't enough. Not only did it have to be similar, it also had to make people angry. I had to draw a sinister smile on the pretty boy's face. Only then would the customers be satisfied. Especially after the news of you abandoning Amelia's spread, my business was explosively good. On the very same day, I received a month's worth of orders and earned enough money for a year's worth of tuition fees. So, even if you blackmail me for a few gold coins, it wouldn't be a problem at all. Looking at this old man in front of me who usually acted serious, but would talk endlessly the moment he started a topic, I couldn't restrain myself anymore and viciously punched him. Asterisk clang. Asterisk this time, it was my hand that hurt. Cade's skin actually shone with a metallic luster. Stone skin? No, iron skin. Even though I didn't sense any magical waves, his skin had already transformed into a steel-like hard skin. I had never seen such a magic before. Haha, this is a magic I created myself. However, the idea was based on the legendary story The Great Forest Nunnery and the 18 Diamond Old Women that you told me in the past. I also used the name Golden Bell from that story. It's able to turn my bones into metal, making me as indestructible as the invincible old women and the Wolverine old women in that story. Amazing, right? All right then, I didn't even know where to start commenting on the magical spell Golden Bell. Should I start with the Wolverine old women, the nunnery, or even the Wolverine old women? But now, I finally understood that although the current Cade was still a playboy, he was at least a true archmage. Just like how water magic was separated from ice magic, earth magic's closest relative was doubtlessly metal magic, which was famous for its outstanding defensive abilities. But unlike ice magic, which could only focus on the main topic, the metal element was inextricably linked to the earth element. If one didn't cultivate earth magic to a certain degree, they wouldn't even have the right to learn metal magic. Being able to maintain the metal element in its original state was definitely a unique skill. This doubtlessly allowed me to understand Cade's current power level, but it also gave me a new idea. Cade, come over and help me out. You should be quite familiar with earth magic, right? Since Cairo City was dominated by earth element mages, the records here naturally focused on earth magic, earth element creatures, and magic equipment. Of course, I wouldn't be here to study earth magic. Although there was no harm in studying more, with my current talent in magic, it would take me at least several dozen years to learn a new type of elemental magic from scratch. I didn't have that kind of free time. Omdarokin is at the peak of the earth element, and earth magic is inextricably linked to him. I don't believe that he only has the power of the mortal plane. What history does he have? What weaknesses does he have? What elemental magic he's skilled in? And what hidden aces he has? We absolutely must find out before the battle begins. Hearing this, Cade revealed a smile that seemed to say, I knew you would have this trick up your sleeve. If someone else starts a fight, you might seem like you don't care at all, but in reality, you'll spend the entire night investigating the other party's 18 generations of ancestors. You're still exactly the same as before. Cade clapped his hands as he continued to spout about his dark history that made people want to beat him up. Asterisk clap, clap, clap. Asterisk all the magical lamps in the hall were lit up, and all the doors were opened wide. Large numbers of young mages poured in and began busying themselves. The Archmage had already sent a message to everyone, giving them the task of searching. Between the bookshelves, there were already people busying themselves. Group A, start with history and see if there's any record of Onderoken fighting. Group B would like to investigate the Earth Elemental Lords and Elemental Gods. Their abilities should be useful as a reference. Group C, start with high-level Earth Elemental Magic. Perhaps there's an ability similar to Onderoken's. The most important thing is the forbidden spells that humans can't use. Right, there's also the forbidden spells of the Kingdom of the Elves. The students began to actively search, and Cade spoke in a rare, serious tone. At this time, let's not face him alone like we did in the past. Besides, this is our battle, so let's trust our companions a little more. This was the most serious expression Cade had had on his face since we met. Yeah, I felt inexplicably moved as I casually took out a book and began reading. What's this? Underneath the cover of the hardcover book, which had the words Steel Elemental Construction Model, was actually a book of drawings, all of which were pictures of naked young girls. The Archmage who silently took the book and hid it under his robe explained everything. Using books that no one has borrowed in the library for several years as a cover, and hiding your own personal techniques inside. This hasn't changed at all. As far as the eye could see, many students were surreptitiously heading for certain bookshelves. It seemed that there were quite a few who were doing this. Ah, how strange. I actually found A.H. Before that newbie could even shout, someone else covered his mouth and dragged him away. Some things were already common knowledge, but there were still teachers here, so it wouldn't be a good thing if it spread. As for the treasure he found, it instantly disappeared without a trace. It seemed that someone had already taken it for themselves. Judging from a student's actions and scale, in this city where there were obviously more women than men, some industries were still underdeveloped, but some industries were obviously profitable. For example, the Goblin Publishing Company's emblem on the drawing book doubtlessly explained the source of these books. The students' teleportation was organized by the Mage Country's officials, so there were restrictions on how much luggage they could bring. The Goblins' dimensional tearing devices were much more flexible. Even if only 1 out of 10 books could be teleported over, as long as that one book sold for the price of 10 copies, they naturally wouldn't make a loss. And with my understanding of the Goblins, they would most likely ask for a price of 1,000 books. Haha, you really are the same as before. What? You're still collecting such books. This time, it was my turn to tease this old bastard. The Goblins gave it to me. The Goblins gave it to me. I don't know what they wanted with me, so I just left it here. It was quite rare for this old bastard to even blush. But if what he said was true, then I would probably have to reevaluate the Goblins' abilities. At the very least, their ability to bribe was ridiculous. At least let the Goblins bleed before we leave. They've earned too much recently, so it's about time for them to bleed something. All right then, let's ignore that mysterious voice in the corner of the room. You won't laugh at me, will you? I won't. I can completely understand. How can you understand? You're so popular back then, and you're so young now. Just how many girlfriends do you have now? How many beautiful women have you been intimate with? Ah, don't tell me that you're a winner in life. I moved my lips, but didn't say my final answer. Actually, I'm the same as you. I've also been single for more than 300 years. Intimate contact with beautiful women does having my body cut open and my heart dug out count? You can't be too Omdaroken. When the innumerable forces of the crusade gathered together, my casual words spread everywhere. In a way, I wasn't wrong in saying that. When all the opposing forces gathered together, even their own side was astonished at how strong the opposing forces were. Another problem was that the command system was in chaos. Different weapons, equipment, and supplies were all different. Many organizations even had grudges against each other, which was impossible to sort out. It's impossible to command everyone. It doesn't matter. All we have to do is attack them all. You don't understand? Fine then, everyone can fight for themselves and do whatever they want. This was already a temporary team, and the leaders of all the opposing forces were basically unwilling to submit to their comrades. Asking for some sort of command wouldn't end well. On the contrary, if everyone fought for themselves and only cared about themselves, it would be easier for them to obtain excellent results. And right now, I was busy punching a certain person's head with my fists. Renee, you really are daring. Chapter 217. Wherever the endless demon army passed by, the ground would be scorched, and the air would be filled with the smell of sulfur. Ruins and wreckage would become the main theme of the world. If there was one type of racial discrimination that was considered correct and natural in the mortal plane, then it would probably be prejudice against demons and devils. As the incarnations of chaos, demons would indeed never do anything good. They would find joy in the destruction of other lives. Death and screams would be their marching song. Souls would be their food and supplies. In fact, even the undead, existences that brought death, were created by ancient demons. Not to mention, every holy war had always treated them as the antagonists. Calling them the source of all evil would be a bit unfair, but it would be appropriate to call them the ultimate antagonists. And right in front of me was an endless demon army. The camp they occupied was filled with the smell of distortion. The earth was angry yet helpless, and the dimensional laws of the mortal plane were being rewritten. Look, this is my army. Amazing, isn't it? I couldn't help but get angry at this silly girl who was so proud of herself. She was obviously just pretending to be stupid. The only thing worth celebrating was that her body didn't seem distorted due to chaos corrosion. In that case, either she was perfectly capable of hiding her own mutations and distortions, or she had completely mastered chaos and hadn't mutated her physical body or soul at all. Considering the other end of the bloodline chain, the latter was more likely. But even so, I was still quite angry. Damn it, you really dare to do it. You know what the end result is for anyone who interacts with demons and devils. I even know a dozen who've had their physical bodies and souls devoured by demons. That's more than enough for me to write a complete guide to being deceived, and you still dare to... Renee didn't reply. She simply maintained her smile as she looked at me. She was acting like a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. At this moment, I realized that not only did she know the consequences, she also intended to bear the consequences. Forget it, I don't care anymore. Do whatever you want. In the end, I could only angrily toss out this sentence, just like a parent who had been angered by a naughty child. This sounded quite serious, but it was actually a type of helplessness that I couldn't say anything about. There's not much time left. I don't want to stand behind and watch anymore. Her last sentence caused my heart to tremble. It seemed that I had only arranged the path that I thought was the best for my juniors, but I had never cared about their own feelings. The orthodox path was indeed the best, but it also meant that it would be difficult and slow to progress. It was likely that it would be impossible for them to become the top-level combat strength that would affect the overall situation before the Holy War ended. In the end, they might end up just like me back then. Despite being the leader of a country's prince and bearing the trust of the citizens, in the face of an irresistible enemy, I could only watch helplessly as the knights and citizens were sacrificed, unable to do anything about it. In Rain's perspective, that was the most likely fate to occur. In order to control her own fate, she made a choice to absolutely pursue power. In fact, judging from her calm smile, she had already mentally prepared herself to accept the consequences, including the mental preparation to have a falling out with me because of this. As a princess, as well as the heir to the Donlon royalty, I can't hand over the fate of my country to someone else. Even if my country's destruction is already fated, I will at the very least give everything I have to change this damned fate. Beneath this seemingly silly smile was the same persistence as her ancestors. Perhaps, from the very start, I had underestimated this lass. You'd better reflect on your actions. All right then. I didn't know what else to say. I tossed down this seemingly valiant, but actually meaningless threat as I turned around and left. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that I was fleeing. After I calmed down, I hesitated for a moment before finally speaking in a low voice. Eliza, you know more about demons than I do. However, my usual instantaneous response didn't come. It seemed that the dimensional barrier had also caused my silver ring to lose its ability to contact me. I had also lost the chance to learn more about demons. It would seem that I need to have a good discussion with Cavendish. Perhaps some things couldn't be avoided anymore. Congratulations to host for increasing your reputation level yet again. You are now respected, infamous. Please keep up the good work. A sudden system notification interrupted my thoughts. Although this doubtlessly meant that I was now one step closer to my myth rank quest, I glanced at my system again. That huge debt of 67%, 33423, was something I couldn't bear to look at directly. I owe even more now. Respect for the infamy in parentheses after that. Actually, it was quite easy to understand. Normally, my system would increase my reputation level by neutral, cold talk, friendly, respected, venerated, and worshipped. But ever since I had used some underhanded methods in order to quickly increase my reputation level, although my reputation level had increased much faster, there was an additional infamous after friendly and an additional infamous after respected, which made me feel rather helpless. Underhanded methods? It was like this: look, it's that Roland, the bastard who toyed with the angel Amelia's feelings. I heard that he was a super scumbag back in the day. Stop pointing. Be careful not to get pregnant. I heard that he's a great pervert who can make a woman pregnant just by looking at her. He's already several hundred years old, and he's still dressed so young. His intentions are unfathomable. I heard that he recently tricked more than 10 young girls. I heard that back in the day, he dated 2 idol-level beautiful teachers at the same time. He even had a foot in the other 2 girls' boats. Later, he was exposed, and someone wanted to kill him. He didn't even have time to collect his graduation certificate and directly escaped. As I walked, I heard all sorts of rumors that would make me go crazy. Yet, I couldn't do anything about it. This was just like hell. The reason? These rumors were all my own doing. From a certain standpoint, this was the result that I wanted. I can't continue like this. My reputation level has been stuck at 212/20,000 for a long time now. It seems that I won't be able to increase my reputation in the near future. In the midst of a major battle, my ace card had to be mortgaged due to a lack of money. I was probably the only one who had such a trump card. If I couldn't redeem it at a critical moment and even lost the battle because of this, that would be far too embarrassing. Yet, my system's abnormal reputation quest just so happened to require me to at least reach venerated in order to proceed to the next step. Even if I did all sorts of good deeds, I was still stuck at just above friendly. I was far from reaching the next step of respect, not to mention the unimaginably high venerated. This wasn't the first time that the reputation system had appeared. Previously, the Roland Sacred Sword had a special effect that would greatly increase the user's reputation with the people of the Mist. I had previously done some research on that abnormal reputation system and discovered that the system wasn't omnipotent. This so-called reputation, in the end, still depended on how many people knew about you and how deep of an impression you had. As for how many people counted for 1 point, that was impossible to calculate. If the Roland Sacred Sword's reputation bonus became a reality, it would be nothing more than every person of the people of the Mist having high expectations of the sword wielder. They would proactively spread the sword wielder's identity and learn about his deeds. This would naturally increase the user's reputation. As long as you know the rules, it's possible to cheat. And so, after thinking about it for a long time, I finally came up with a devious method when I recalled how celebrities in my previous life were always hyped up and gossiped about others. Good deeds don't leave the house, while evil deeds travel thousands of miles. Reputation needs to be known. As for good deeds and excellent people, it's fine to say something like other people's children, since it won't reach another street. But if there's any bad deeds or gossiped about others, even if they don't actively spread it, it'll still travel thousands of miles in a single night. Intelligent life forms are naturally highly sensitive to negative gossip, and they're even more sensitive to gossiping about famous people. Isn't it because of my face? I didn't want it for the past 300 years. All right then, that was the truth. All I had to do was toss out 2 slightly dirty jokes and then arrange for a student to ask me about it in a public place. I only smiled and shook my head without forcefully denying it. And so, the negative gossip was successfully created. Originally, the jokes only mentioned my past unsuccessful relationship with Amelia. But looking at the rumors, it was obvious that once the gossip started spreading, it would go out of control. Making a woman pregnant with just a look? Are you even mages? That's so unmagical. No, just think about it. He's Archmage Cade Sr., so he's definitely an amazing Archmage. It said that he successfully fused a fragment of his own soul into his magical will. All he needs to do is stare at you, and you'll be able to cast a mental spell that attacks your will. And that terrifyingly strong soul fragment will directly use your physical body to form a baby. That's the principle behind getting pregnant with a look. If that's the case, doesn't that mean even men? I just met him yesterday, and I even smiled at him, and he glanced at me. Don't tell me I'm also. Junior, I suggest that you go to the infirmary and get yourself checked out. There's already several hundred numbers in the infirmary. Your senior here has a number for the first 100 that I'll sell to you for cheap. To be honest, it was far too inconceivable for the rumors to develop to such an extent. Get pregnant with a look? Mental magic? Get pregnant with a man? You actually believe such unmagical rumors? Do you even have the right to call yourselves mages? Also, I'll remember you, the one who's trying to get rich in the chaos. Brat, don't let me find a chance. If I really do, just wait for me to make things difficult for you. The most frustrating part was that I was the one who created this situation, and I couldn't even defend myself. In order to spread this rumor even more, I even had to add fuel to the fire, such as flirting with a few beauties. Cough, I definitely didn't do this out of selfishness. Definitely not. I did indeed ask for it, but I was the only one who was unlucky. So how could I? Look, it's that young girl abductor, the white-robed pervert Cade. It said that he's already committed countless crimes, and he's only suppressing them with his authority. How could that be possible? Teacher Cade is so well-respected. It's just a rumor. No, he's good friends with that pervert king. It's said that they often exchange criminal experiences together. Last time, a student even asked that Roland, and that guy actually didn't deny it. And so, Cade's century-old reputation was destroyed in a single day. He was already a bit indiscreet to begin with, and now that these clues matched up, old Cade's reputation instantly became incredibly strange. It's not nice to scam your bro. This was returning the favor. Did you really think that I didn't know who was the one who added fuel to the fire? You even used mental magic to distort the truth. All right then, let's not talk about old Cade, who is currently doing his best to redeem his reputation, only to be met with screams, and slaps from women. Although destroying his own reputation was indeed a devious move, and he suffered great losses, the benefits were also quite obvious. I reached respected in just 2 days. My reputation has risen to such a terrifying level. I'm afraid that all the factions in this dimension now know about me. It was obviously a good thing that I had a myth-rank quest, but I still had tears in my eyes. The reason? Last night, I only ate a bowl of noodles in Noodle Shop, and even a 70-year-old old lady was so scared that she abandoned the shop and ran away. I only nodded at a young student on the side of the road, and that student actually screamed in agony and then pretended to be dead on the ground. Did I dare to believe it? That guy was even a muscular middle-aged man. I was quite embarrassed. Thanks to them, my reputation is becoming stranger and stranger. It doesn't matter anymore. What's a reputation? Can it be eaten? It doesn't matter if I have a good reputation or a bad reputation. What's the difference? All right then, if it really didn't matter at all, then what were the tears in my eyes? Although the negative news increased my reputation at an astonishing rate, there was a bottleneck. Due to the limited number of people in Cairo City, it seemed that my reputation would stop increasing after I reached respected, infamous, which was quite vexing for me. It would seem that I still need a big piece of news. Right, Amelia and the others are coming here in 2 days. Perhaps that's it. I hope that I don't get beaten to death by Eliza when I get back. As a veteran teacher of the Cloud Tower, this wasn't Amelia's first time coming to Cairo City. In fact, she had even been stationed here for 3 years and made countless hidden arrangements. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to successfully prepare her garden so easily this time. In order to swindle research funds, as well as in order to prevent her own private research from being exposed, Amelia put on a good front. Her reputation had always been good. Apart from the ancient artifacts of her generation who knew her true identity, most mages treated her as a trustworthy senior. Due to her gentle personality, Leda-like appearance, fake, and even the legendary royal bloodline, real, she treated everyone equally, treating them like experimental subjects, which made her even more popular. In order to maintain her good image, she had all her random things outside before entering Cairo City. She even changed her clothes, took a bath, and even spent quite a bit of time in front of a mirror. Only when she was able to conceal her insanity and the perfect angel Amelia reappeared did she raise her parasol and casually enter the city. But the moment she entered the city, she noticed that something was off. Everyone was looking at her with strange expressions. In the past, there was respect, adoration, love, and even infatuation. But now, there was pity in their eyes, as if she had suffered some kind of tragedy. Work hard. Persevere. Everyone will love and respect you as always. Let bygones be bygones. We, the Angel Support Club, will forever support you. The indistinct cheering sound behind him was even more puzzling. But soon she understood. After turning a corner, I arrived at Cairo's most prosperous cross street, which was also the only way to reach the center of the city. The crowds of the past were nowhere to be seen. The streets here were now filled with extravagant flowers, and there were even flags and balloons on both sides of the street. And in the middle of the garden, there was a familiar figure wearing a white formal attire, half kneeling there. My dear Amelia, please forgive me for hurting you in the past. My dear Amelia, let's get back together. Amelia was stunned for a moment before she squeezed out these words through gritted teeth. Bastard Roland. Chapter 218. Wong Feng. Roland finally got what he wanted. He's on headlines. When I abandoned all unnecessary concerns and pride, the things I did were so shameless that even I was afraid of myself. I had gone to great lengths to obtain the flowers from a plant mage, and I stole someone else's groom's gown. I even spent a large amount of money to buy the balloons from the gnomes. If it wasn't for the fact that it was still daytime, I would have even prepared gnome fireworks. In order to grab the headlines, I was going all out. It seemed that my luck was quite good. At the very least, it was much better than a certain person who failed to steal the headlines. I didn't encounter any even more eye-catching news. When the news of kneeling at the crossroads begging for a reconciliation spread, especially since one of the parties involved was the famous female Archmage Amelia, the former Truth Overseer who was beautiful, intelligent, and powerful, this super gossip swept through the entire city that very day. It was likely that no matter where one was, this matter would be discussed. Did you hear? That guy actually bought all the flowers and spent at least several tens of thousands of gold coins just for that one moment. I was both delighted and terrified as I watched my reputation skyrocket. I prayed that this matter wouldn't spread back to the mortal plane, especially not to a certain person. But what terrified me the most was Amelia's reaction. If she had attacked me back then, I had predicted that she would have such a reaction, which would have been much easier to deal with. As long as she attacked me, this matter would be over, and the headlines would be set. Reconciliation failed would also be a huge piece of news, which would further solidify my identity as a scumbag. By the way, it wasn't easy for me to think of ways to make myself a scumbag. However, Amelia's reaction was completely out of my expectations. She didn't get angry, nor did she attack me on the spot. She just clenched her teeth and squeezed out a few words from between her teeth. Roland, you bastard. However, her voice was very low. Coupled with the mysterious blush on her face and the red glow on her cheeks, it was inevitable that people would think too much. I could understand that she was trying to protect her image and forcefully suppress her anger so that she wouldn't reveal her true self. But what did you say when you accepted the flowers with a red face? Did that mean you agreed to reconcile? But the problem was that it was just a rumor from the very start. How could you possibly reconcile without even starting a relationship? Congratulations, you actually managed to get ahead of me, and you're even teacher Amelia. You're such a happy person, aren't you? Sigh. In this world, you're probably the only one who can subdue her. Treat her well in the future and don't mess around anymore. Otherwise, many people will find trouble with you. Kate, did this bro's wedding blessings come too soon? Don't stroke your beard and give me blessings from an otherworldly master. I'm not ready yet. All right, since I didn't think things through, I'm afraid I'm in big trouble. Whenever we met, the usually calm Amelia would blush and not know what to do with her face. Her blush would extend all the way to her ears. A fierce tiger would suddenly transform into a cute tiger, and a crazy which would suddenly transform into a young girl in love. This strange feeling of incongruity made me want to bang my head against a wall. Pop, pop, pop. All right, then. I'd already hit my head against the wall, and my head was covered in blood, but the matter still hadn't been resolved. Over the past few days, even Renee looked at me as if she was looking at scum. What was even stranger was that after I reached venerated, I didn't receive the usual infamous or something like that. Instead, it was venerated, the prodigal son returns 20,000/20,000. System notification. The prodigal son's return is more valuable than gold. You must treat him well in the future. Mommy is so happy. I wish you all the best. Hurry up and give birth to a super troublemaking and lively baby just like you. All right then, I truly didn't know how to face this. If it was possible, I really wanted to die together with my system. However, there was another, slightly more serious system notification that made me heave a sigh of relief. System notification. Your reputation with the mage country of Arleden has reached venerated. The first stage of the epic quest Battle of the Two Dragons has been completed. By default, you have chosen the Arleden faction. You will be rewarded with 50,000 fate points. For the next stage of the quest, please go to the capital of Arleden and look for the Truth Overseer, Osloan. If you don't trigger the quest within 1 year, the first stage's rewards will be deducted twice as much. 88%, 10243. Perhaps the large amount of fate points I received gave my system new motivation. My system's mouth became even more sarcastic now that it had recovered its energy. As for the subsequent quest, I didn't intend to do it for the time being. The rewards for this quest came so easily. Easy? Are you sure? Perhaps the scammers would come later. As for the penalty of fate points, I could just sneak over and trigger it. Do you think your system is an idiot? All right then. I knew that I would most likely be scammed by my system. But at the very least, there was nothing wrong with thinking about it. I truly felt that this was a deep pit that I didn't want to jump into. However, based on my understanding of my system, there would always be a reason for me to jump into it. I had no choice but to jump into it. After tossing all these troubles to the back of my head, there was also something to be happy about. At the very least, my reputation was growing much faster than I had expected. I wouldn't need to activate my backup plan and risk being beaten up by Adam. I would need to drag the other beautiful mage Marguerite, who had a rather high reputation, down into a forbidden love triangle. Perhaps it would even be a four-sided love triangle. For some reason, I felt a sense of desolation in my heart. In this day and age, apart from me, was there anyone else who would voluntarily become a scumbag? Why was it so difficult to obtain some reputation? All right then, let's not talk about such heart-wrenching matters. Let's think about something more pleasant. At the very least, our army had finished reorganizing. Although it was impossible to count on having a unified command, at the very least, everyone was quite interested in Omdaroken. Until we achieved our common goal, we wouldn't have to worry about us destroying ourselves due to internal conflicts. In order to avoid the situation of Roland feels that he has an obvious advantage, so Roland directly owls out, Roland typing GG surrender, what a pity, I did my best to increase our chances of victory. The first wave would always be sent out as cannon fodder. However, this time, the cannon fodder was of a rather high level. The mighty demon army became the first wave. Of course, if everything went smoothly, it might also become the last wave. As for why I had to send them out, it wasn't that I was personally displeased with them. It was that all the other species and factions were displeased with them. Just being on the same side as the demons made them feel uneasy, as if they were afraid of some earth-shattering scheme waiting for them. You're saying that you have a top-level demon warlock controlling these demons? Stop joking. Do you think this is my first day in a mortal plane? Such a large demon army is definitely beyond the control of any mortal plane's residents. How could it be possible without the intervention of a domain lord from the lower planes? Don't work so hard at the end just to let the demons take advantage of us. Before we figure out the truth of the matter, we refuse to listen to your orders. My reputation was truly terrible to such an extent. And so, for the sake of harmony and morale on my side, I unhesitatingly had Renee send out the entire demon army and have them act as the vanguard. Rain was also very straightforward, very directly agreed. As I stood on the back of a demon dragon and watched the demon army march with destruction, leaving behind scorched earth, I felt a mysterious sense of delight, as if I were the evil boss behind the scenes. You've only just realized? From a lich to the commander of the undead army, to all sorts of schemes, to the point where even the gods are part of your schemes. You've always been a major demon antagonist. All right then, I regretted asking this. But suddenly, Renee smiled slyly like a little fox. Still, there's nothing bad about being an antagonist. At the very least, bad people will live longer than good people. If you really were as righteous as the main characters in those novels, the cruel world would have long since devoured you to the point where not even your bones would remain. As Rain said that, she even leaned over to my side and gently rubbed her shoulder against mine like a kitten. She used a rare honorific, as if she was using her own way of apologizing in a spoiled manner. Don't think that I'll forgive you so easily for using the power of chaos. Although I said that, I was unable to say anything harsh to her. Perhaps ever since I noticed how similar Renee was to Prince Roland from back in the day, I had already tacitly accepted her independence and the right to make her own decisions. When we returned to the mortal plane, arranged for me to have a chat with Cavendish. Hearing this, Renee's gloomy expression instantly brightened up as she smiled brightly. Okay, just give me some sunlight and you'll be so happy. Remember, power is only a tool. Don't be controlled by power. Second brother Cavendish also said the same thing. All right then, since when did he become second brother? It would seem that I had underestimated this brat's suicidal instincts. Still, there are some things that I still needed to remind her. Never trust chaos. Chaos is unfathomable. Anything that can be predicted isn't chaos. That's why you need to learn how to control chaos, not be controlled by chaos. Second brother also said the same thing. All right then, since I wouldn't be able to gain an advantage with words, I decided to focus on A's past army. Not a single demon would be able to remain calm when faced with several dozen demon legions. The battle instantly became a cruel war of attrition from the very start. As expected, Immortal Orkin had a backup plan. As soon as the demons entered his territory, countless earth elementals drilled out from the depths of the ground, and violent earthquakes created countless ravines. As the demons fell into them, the terrain changed dramatically, and the demons who did not fall to their death had to face the encirclement of earth elemental creatures several times their number in the divided terrain. However, there were far too many demons. The winged demons began attacking from the sky, while the earth elemental creatures lacked warriors capable of flight. Soon, the battle began to tilt in favor of the demons. It can't be over so easily, right? That Omdarokin seems to be exaggerating. I merely chuckled. If the demons were so easy to deal with, we would have come looking for them the moment we arrived. That wouldn't have needed so much effort. Even a broken ship would have two nails. As the most ancient elemental god, even if he had fallen to such a state, he would definitely still have many life-saving trump cards. Could these demons really deal with him? I wasn't that optimistic. I only hoped that they would be able to force out a few trump cards. It would be even better if Omdarokin personally participated. But judging from the current situation, I wouldn't be able to see that. Suddenly, the entire area began to violently tremble and then shatter. This time, several dozen gigantic giant sandworms crawled out. These several 100-meter-long giant sandworms were low-intelligence creatures. They probably only knew how to eat and sleep. However, none of the natives here dared to look down on them. That was because they were large, ridiculously large. In their original form, the head of a giant sandworm was the size of a gnome harvester. However, their snake-like bodies were more than 100 meters long. It was even possible for them to grow to more than 300 meters long after they fully matured. Their bodies were as thick as steel. They were impervious to all weapons and had no sense of pain. Perhaps they wouldn't be able to swallow you whole, but they would definitely be able to drag you into the ground and strangle you to death. If you were unlucky enough to run into these creatures after they appeared, then even if you had already finished building your base, you would have to immediately relocate. These powerful low-level creatures were originally viewed as the natural calamities of the mortal plane. But now, it would seem that Omdrokin, the oldest resident of the mortal plane, had a way to control them. The demons that Renee had transformed into were all natives that had just recently been demonized. Although there were a large number of them, they lacked a high-level demon commander. The earth magic and natural talents that Renee had inherited weren't much of a threat to the giant sandworms to begin with. Their gigantic bodies also ignored the giant sandworms' physical attacks. In a short period of time, the newly born demon army met with the most difficult enemy to deal with. Why don't we have the demons retreat? There's no need. It's impossible to bring them back to the mortal plane. Let's just let them be a little more useful. Renee's eyes were glowing with a dim yellow light. The power of chaos was now under her control. Slaves, for the sake of your master, offer your final loyalty. The chaos flame goblet in Renee's hand transformed into liquid droplets that fell into the air. The droplets transformed into a bewitching flash that dyed the dim yellow sky blood red. The demon army paused for a moment before quickly moving. They blindly pounced on the giant sandworms. And then, boom. The burning god's self-destruction was basically a must-have technique for all natives of the lower planes. This attack was a mixture of flesh, blood, and the essence of one's entire life. It was at least 3 times the maximum power of an individual. Not only that, these demons even knew how to self-destruct together to increase the power of the explosion. Even the powerful giant sandworms were unable to withstand this endless self-destruction. They rolled about in silent pain as green blood flowed all over the ground. It seemed that the giant sandworms discovered that the prey in front of them wasn't delicious at all. The injured giant sandworms dived underground one after another. It would seem that Omdrokin's restrictions on them weren't that strong. At this moment, the demon army was still quite numerous. They formed groups and charged towards the earth elemental god's territory. Suddenly, the aura of a sandstorm appeared behind us. The inferno demon dragon hurriedly lowered its body and spun around, dodging that dragon breath. However, it almost threw us off. You actually dare to distort the noble will of my tribe. Invaders from another plane bear the fate of destruction. That was the angry roar of a gigantic dragon. The sky was now filled with grayish-yellow dragon wings. As Omdrokin's allies, the Salons had arrived. As for me, this was to be expected, which was why I smiled. Amelia, as expected of the Salons from Omdrokin's side. It's your turn. What? You're not going to do it if you don't agree? My great aunt, don't try to take advantage of the situation. Fine, I'll agree to everything. Chapter 219. The god of law was fair, but from a certain standpoint, he was also strict. As the embodiment of justice, he would forever follow his own concept of law to fulfill his divine concept. He abandoned his own purity in exchange for it, which allowed him to grow faster than all other gods. Even if I left a back door for him, it would only affect him for a short period of time. However, some troublesome matters were unavoidable. For example, as a member of the Order God faction, he would instinctively despise those of chaos. That was why Renee, who came into contact with chaos, was destined to lose her status as a Law Knight. Renee, level 60 Law Knight, former, /level 20 Aura Knight, /level 14 Hell Black Knight. Total level, 94. Overall level, 97. Overall evaluation, middle level legend. I didn't know what Renee had done, nor did I want to know if she had used the power of demons or done something else that crossed the line, which caused her to lose her status as a Law Knight. But judging from how demons could obtain power through destruction and sacrifice, and Renee's ridiculously fast growth in level, she probably hadn't done anything good. Even if most elemental creatures were just wild beasts without any self-awareness, and even if they were destroyed, they would be able to reassemble their elements. That still wasn't a reason for her to go on a killing spree. Perhaps this was the reason why she had lost her job as a Law Knight. As for why I was still able to maintain my job as a Law Knight, it was probably because I was extremely skilled at exploiting loopholes in the law. In my eyes, this dimensional expedition was nothing more than a large-scale operation to hunt down a fugitive. That's right, fugitive Omdorokin, guilty of murder, war crimes, genocide, destruction of public property, a heinous criminal. His first operation had changed the terrain, and he had participated in this battle as an accomplice to the Beastmen's war crimes. His second operation had destroyed Red Maple City's defensive line in anger, and countless warriors had died on the spot. The bloody battle that followed on that snowy night would probably be traced back to Omdorokin's blood feud. If it weren't for the fact that the Grey Elves and Shiloah's expeditionary army had forced the Beastmen from the plains to retreat, it was likely that the entire battlefield would have become imbalanced. Perhaps the entire Northlands would have been lost, and the Beastmen would have taken over, leading to a new round of genocide. That was because I would have been unable to turn the tables in such a situation. A trump card like God's Descent would be impossible to use against mortals. I wasn't some righteous law enforcer, nor did I acknowledge that there was any so-called justice in this cruel world. However, I could still vividly remember the expressions of innocent civilians who died and the soldiers who protected their homes. If I didn't make Omdorokin pay the price, I probably wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Everyone, pay attention. Focus your attacks on the elemental throne. I don't believe that bastard can still be a coward. Seek justice for the innocent dead? I'm not that noble. I just don't like that guy. After that guy caused trouble, he went back to his hometown and thought that the matter was over. He went to sleep peacefully, thinking that nobody would be able to control him. However, I didn't intend to stop here. I might as well have that bastard go down as well to accompany those innocent civilians who died. At this moment, the battle had reached a stalemate. As expected of Omdorokin, he was the most ancient elemental god. All sorts of ancient alliances had summoned him, and countless cannon fodder had been forcefully sent onto the battlefield. Sand dragons, single pincer ogres, Kasola elemental knight, giant sandworms, titan descendants, earth dwarves, rock dwarves, mountain giants, obolos, and various other ancient species that had long since disappeared from history jumped onto the battlefield. It was as if a museum of earth elemental creatures had been created here. However, we aren't inferior to them either. In terms of numbers and strength, we aren't lacking either. Amelia's Death Garden, Marguerite's Rune Puppets, Rune Giants, and various Earth Elemental Lords' armies all appeared. Wasn't this just a competition of cannon fodder? Who was afraid of who? Elemental creatures from both sides fought against each other. Dragons roared in the sky, and tower giants and their symbiotes entered the battlefield together. The battlefield had long since become chaotic, and I could faintly sense that the enemy's elemental army was increasing in number. However, this was within my expectations from the very start. This was my home turf. If Omdorokin was still alone, I would have suspected that he was plotting something. Since he was constantly summoning reinforcements, it was obvious that he was in a difficult situation. And his next step, if he still hasn't appeared, it's obvious that he's stalling for time. Omdorokin isn't a coward who's afraid of death. In that case, he must have an ace up his sleeve that needs time. When I realized this, I didn't intend to wait any longer. Kate, it's your turn. We don't need to evacuate our allies. Even if we're putting on an act, we need to go all the way. There's no need. As long as the enemy isn't an idiot, it's basically impossible for them to release the forbidden spell. If they really don't even have the power to stop the forbidden spell, then we can just cut off the spell. Huh, that's easy for you to say. It's not like you're the one casting the spell. Although I was complaining, judging from the elemental tide behind me, which had suddenly increased by several times, the forbidden spell was already in preparation. Among all the major countries, the mage country had always had a good reputation. However, if there was anything unreasonable about them, it would be their overly stubborn pursuit of all kinds of magic. Forbidden spells were considered to be a large-scale AoE deterrent weapon. It was said that more than half of all forbidden spells that had ever appeared in the world were collected in the mage country's forbidden book library. This was doubtlessly a frightening deterrent in itself. But actually, having information and theories about forbidden spells didn't mean that one could use them. First of all, the requirements for a mage to cast a forbidden spell were incredibly high. Currently, only a single-digit number of forbidden spellcasters had ever been recorded. And most importantly, forbidden spells weren't easy to use. A mage's mana was limited. The reason why a forbidden spell could be so powerful was because of the natural laws of the world and the elemental source. This was often a complicated, and dangerous process. Basically, if a forbidden spell mage started casting a forbidden spell, they would be more than half crippled. Forbidden spells usually took a long time to cast. The shortest forbidden spell would take at least several hours to cast. During this time, the mage wouldn't be able to move, nor would they be able to stop casting. They would have to constantly chant incantations to guide the spell. If they were ambushed, they would either have to forcefully interrupt the spell and suffer a fatal magic backlash, or they would have to bite the bullet. No matter what they did, they would most likely die. And once a forbidden spell was started, the inconceivably powerful forbidden spell waves would be the equivalent of broadcasting to the entire battlefield. I'm going to start a large-scale AoE attack. Kill me if you don't want to die. Anyone who wasn't an idiot would do everything in their power to stop the spell. The worst part was that forbidden spells would also consume the user's life force. Losing 10 years of lifespan was no joke. Some top-level forbidden spells would even require the user to sacrifice their life force and soul. The conclusion was that forbidden spells were useless. Without forbidden spells, most forbidden mages wouldn't be able to live for long. There are far more forbidden spell mages hidden in the shadows than in the open. Of course, this was only the limitation of mortals. For example, in the Ottoman Rain City, divine forbidden spells were far more stealthy and effective than mortal forbidden spells. But even so, Lady Storm and the Water Elemental Goddess had paid a tremendous price for their forbidden spells. Forbidden spells that borrowed divine power also had an unknown flaw. Most of them lacked direct attack power. Even if they could kill the enemy, they would most likely use some sort of natural law to indirectly kill the enemy. I didn't believe that true gods would feel pity for mortals. This was probably another example of the gods not allowing them to directly interfere with the cycle of reincarnation. The era where forbidden spells could be casually tossed around on the ancient god and demon battlefields was long past. In modern warfare, even if there were forbidden spell mages, they would at most be used as a form of deterrence. Unless absolutely necessary, forbidden spell mages would never be used. After all, forbidden spell mages also wanted to live for a few more years. However, there were always exceptions to everything. In recent times, there was a mage who completely disobeyed the unwritten rules and casually tossed forbidden spells around like they were nothing more than cabbages, causing a series of troubles. All right then, that was me, the former Lord of Yongya. The reason why I dared to do so was mainly because I had an endless undead army acting as a barrier. Even if a powerful individual managed to break through to me, my loyal red hunting hounds would teach them the consequences of recklessly using forbidden spells. As for the magic backlash and damage to one's life force, I didn't care about that since I had the body of a lich. If there were any serious repercussions, wouldn't I have my system to deal with it? The current me didn't have the ability to cast forbidden spells, but Cade did. With Amelia and Marguerite, two top-level mages who were truth overseers, supporting him and borrowing the endless elemental power of the Earth elemental plane, the Earth elemental envoy Cade, Eli, was able to cast the forbidden spell Continental Sinking. Incomplete. Yep, it was indeed incomplete. Cade's power level wasn't high enough to use the Continental Sinking, which was one of the top-ranked forbidden spells. The completed form of this forbidden spell would be to directly cut apart an entire area's landmass and its surroundings, either sinking it into the ocean or burying it underground. It was truly frightening. As for Cade's Continental Descent spell, incomplete, it'll probably be like an earthquake that everyone has to hide under a table, but not a single person will be hurt. Not to mention this subtle destructive power. This forbidden spell was indeed complete. And before Cade failed to cast it due to his lack of power, this was indeed a top-level forbidden spell. At this moment, countless rocks were floating in midair, and the number of floating islands suddenly increased by several thousand. The never-ending sandstorm in this plain had mysteriously lost its momentum. Only the increasingly frightening elemental tide was proof that this was the calm before the storm. Target, the elemental throne. The elemental throne was the equivalent of an elemental god's base in this plane. It was also the connection between the elemental god and the earth elemental plane, so it was definitely a critical point. Of course, under normal circumstances, even if an elemental god died, it would simply be the elemental throne changing owners. But if this top-level forbidden spell destroyed everything around it and cut off the connection between the elemental throne and the earth elemental plane, it was likely that the next elemental god would have to wait for a new elemental throne to be born, which would take at least 1,000 years. Indeed, we all knew that this forbidden spell was fake, so it was impossible for it to happen. But in Amdarokin's eyes, this was the enemy's vicious and merciless display. As long as he was still alive, he wouldn't possibly sit by and watch this happen. This was a vicious move that attacked the enemy's weakness, turning passivity into initiative. To put it bluntly, this was nothing more than a bait. And as expected, less than 2 minutes after the forbidden spell's power level rose, a white figure appeared on the battlefield. This white figure was currently rushing towards Cade at high speed. Finally, Amdarokin has appeared. The evil fish has bitten the bait, and it's time to reel in the net. Chapter 220. In Definder's royal palace, a 6-hour marathon negotiation was nearing its end. Then, the next negotiation is estimated to be 6 months from now. Please prepare a sample of minerals and a list of tax-free products before then. We'll strive to complete a comprehensive business alliance during the next negotiation. In order to show how much importance we attach to the next negotiation, Queen Galena will personally come to sign the contract. I hope that you can give her the same treatment. Of course, I'll leave the job of advertising to you as well. After all, we share the same culture and race, so this is a great time to improve the relationship between our countries. We can't waste such a good opportunity to advertise. The same treatment? I understand. I'll tell Her Highness Renee, but at that time, it might be Her Highness Queen Renee. Haha, that's even better. It's getting late, so I'll be taking my leave first. After sending off the young envoy of Slur Kingdom, Wendy, she looked out the window at the carriage that was moving further and further away. Elisa, who was full of energy just a moment ago, sighed. Her seemingly calm face also showed some worry. I haven't been able to contact them for so long. I hope that nothing bad has happened. No. Since all communication with the entire mortal plane has been cut off, something must have happened. I can only hope that they can return safely. Relax, I watched those 2 mischievous little fellows grow up. They don't seem like short-lived people. Kelly smiled, her tone filled with pride. But was it really all right to call Roland a little fellow? Perhaps we shouldn't be worried about them. We should be worried about that Graham guy. Don't be fooled by how calm Roland seemed when he left. Actually, the angrier he was, the calmer he appeared on the surface. He's definitely holding a grudge right now. According to my understanding of him, if he's in a bad mood, he'll think of ways to make others feel even worse. That's why we should be worried about him. From a certain standpoint, it was the wood elf before me who watched Prince Roland grow up. Her instincts were telling me that the situation was getting closer and closer to the truth. They have their own battles, and we have ours. We can't let them come back and look down on us. Work hard, little Eliza. The background of the voice was the busy administrative officials. They had only left for a short while, but the documents and letters waiting to be processed had already piled up into a mountain. Of course, I still need Big Sis Kelly's help. I still have a lot of things that I would like to learn from you. Eliza smiled and nodded her head. Kelly, who had assisted more than a dozen generations of the Mist royalty, was practically impeccable in terms of administrative capabilities. Her several hundred years of administrative experience was indeed astonishing, and she had benefited greatly from it. When Roland once again became a hands-off boss and Renee set off with him, all the administrative and military affairs of the Donlon Principality were thrown to Eliza and the others who stayed behind. The military affairs were still manageable. With the Red Hunting Hounds night around, the formation and training of the various divisions went smoothly. There was no need for any important changes in the overall plan. But on the other hand, the administrative affairs that concerned the people's livelihood were quite critical. These couldn't be delayed for even a single day. Although Donglan Principality didn't have to deal with the arduous task of post-war reconstruction like the Sluir Kingdom, just the large number of Greyblood elves that had migrated to Donglan Principality was enough to cause all the administrative officials to rack their brains. In order to increase living space, the construction of new cities and the renovation of old city districts were all at the top of the list. Apart from that, there were also the annual tasks of expanding Definder's city circle and planting new crops that were scheduled for the new year. The former would affect the living conditions of nearly 30% of the citizens, while the latter would affect the next year's food supply. These were both major tasks that couldn't be allowed to go wrong. And recently, an even more important task was placed on everyone's shoulders, causing the Donglan government, which was already stretched to the limit, to overload even more. In just one short week, the number of administrative officials who were sent to the hospital due to overwork had already exceeded 2 digits. The major task that gave everyone a headache, but that they had to deal with all their might, was the establishment of the Mist Alliance. This was doubtlessly a good thing. Not only that, just news of this would cause the entire country to celebrate. After all, raising the flag of the Mist Alliance would mean that the people of the Mist would be reunited. From a certain standpoint, the already destroyed Mist Kingdom would be rebuilt once again. However, these things happened too quickly. According to the usual practice, a trade negotiation would take several months to settle, and a military alliance would take at least 1 or 2 years to settle. The establishment of a common and comprehensive alliance was a huge matter. Economic, military, political, agricultural, diplomatic, and other aspects had to be unified and coordinated. In the end, they had to reach an outcome that all countries could accept. This was definitely not something that could be solved easily. 10 years, 20 years, perhaps 10 years would be the most realistic scenario. However, Roland's final deadline was a short 2 years. As the core of the Mist Alliance, the Donglan Principality and the Sluir Kingdom had to complete all aspects of the alliance within 1 year. The heavy workload involved was more than enough to send several hundred administrative officials to the mental hospital. Actually, quite a few more had already been sent to the mental hospital due to working overtime. Kelly was the head female official, as well as the princess' personal tutor. Although she didn't have a proper title, she was still the core of the newly born Donglan Principality. Even though she was a wood elf with excellent stamina, she was still quite tired from the heavy workload. Asterisk clap, clap, clap. Asterisk Kelly lightly clapped her hands, attracting the attention of all the busy administrative officials. She then made a decision as she looked at everyone's tired expressions. It's almost dinner time. Everyone, rest early today and don't work overtime. We'll continue tomorrow. But we still haven't finished our work. The Shaywin people are coming tomorrow as well, and we haven't prepared a new contract yet. Also, the Intelligence Department's report still hasn't arrived yet. Work and rest is the only way to last. I don't want to see everyone at the mental hospital again. No matter what work you still have, do it tomorrow. This is an order. Are you going to stop listening to me now that Renee and Roland aren't here? In everyone's eyes, Kelly's current arrogant smile was rather scary. However, her seemingly unreasonable order was filled with concern that warmed everyone's hearts. Ha ha, even if Renee and Roland are here, they probably won't be able to help at all. They'll only cause more trouble. Eliza's words caused everyone to chuckle. However, this was indeed the truth. If Renee was here, she would only be a rubber stamp, and people would need to be sent to look for her, since she was skipping work. If Roland was here, it would probably be the same, but there would be no need to send anyone to look for him. That was because as long as Roland didn't go out himself, no one would be able to find him. They're only so similar when they're causing more trouble for others. When he comes back, he'll definitely make it up to us. While complaining, the two of them began taking over various tasks. Neither of them were ordinary people, and their bodies were in excellent condition. It seemed that they would be unable to escape working overtime at night. It was impossible for me to know what was happening in my homeland since I was far away in a foreign land. In fact, I didn't even have the time to think about it. After all, the powerful Earth Elemental God was always a tremendous pressure on my head. Previously, Even though a major battle was imminent, I had spent my precious time preparing for war in the library. Of course, there was a reason for that. Knowing oneself and knowing one's enemy would ensure victory in every battle. If I didn't even know what trump cards Amdarokin had, I naturally wouldn't be able to prepare any countermeasures. If I had to rely on human lives to make up for it, wouldn't I lose the advantage of taking the initiative? As the most ancient elemental god, even if there were any records of him fighting, it was likely several thousand years ago. Although the two elemental gods on our side had provided some information, it was probably outdated. Not to mention, they hadn't actually managed to force Amdarokin into desperate straits, so it was only natural that they didn't know what else he was hiding. However, with the help of several top-level archmages and several hundred students, we looked through countless books and exchanged combat experiences from various factions. As long as it was related to earth magic, we summarized several hundred rules, common methods, and high-level extensions of the earth element's usage. In the end, we compiled a total of 30 books, filling up an entire bookshelf. Not only did it include a plan to deal with Amdarokin, it also included a general outline of how to use earth magic. It would be of great significance for earth magic cultivation and research. At the time, Cade was quite happy to say that with the results of this compilation, he wouldn't need to worry about research funding for the next 10 years, which made Amelia quite envious. There's an old saying in the magical world: how much power a mage can bring out depends on how long they've prepared. If they have enough time to prepare and have enough backup plans, it's even possible to slay a god. If you don't care about the consequences and come to me on your own, wouldn't that make you just like a warrior who thinks with your muscles? If it wasn't for the fact that Marguerite intentionally glanced at me out of the corner of her eye when she said this, which obviously implied something, I definitely wouldn't have agreed with her. Confirm the target, observe the opponent, gather information, and determine countermeasures. Mages were a job class that, apart from a very small minority of people, weren't skilled at melee combat. It was only natural that mages would never directly face off against an enemy. Previously, we had been forced into battle in many situations without sufficient preparation. But this time, we had more than enough time, and we had more than enough battle simulations and preparations. Otherwise, we wouldn't have come to attack the enemy's nest, as expected of a turtle hiding in its shell. TSK, TSK, TSK. Just like an immortal plane, Amdarokin's basic form was still that of a stone giant. It was just that compared to Amdarokin's form in the mortal plane, the current Amdarokin made me feel helpless just by looking at his physical appearance. Unlike Amdarokin's pitch-black shell on the ground, Amdarokin's entire body seemed to be made out of precious white jade. It seemed exquisite to the point where even a casual touch would shatter it. However, the fact that Amdarokin's feet were able to cause the ground to sink with just a single step doubtlessly proved that Amdarokin's exquisite white jade armor was terrifyingly high quality. The forbidden spell shockwaves continued as Amdarokin charged out like a madman. All obstacles in his way were viciously knocked away, and all spells and arrows were ignored by him. Just a preliminary calculation was enough to tell that Amdarokin was likely to be invulnerable. Still, this was to be expected. Since Amdarokin's path of charge was confirmed, it was time to activate the traps that had been prepared beforehand. Realm of Flowing Water. The water elemental god activated his divine domain after sufficient preparations were made to create his territory. A river suddenly descended from the sky, bringing with it a torrent of mud and sand that swept across the land. The mud and water combined into a mudslide. It seemed to be made of steel, but it was actually quite soft. This flowing mud and sand was far more difficult to deal with in a flood. Once someone got caught in it, they wouldn't be able to use their strength, even if they had thousands of kilograms of strength. This was a trap created by nature. It had nothing to do with magic resistance. It was also a death trap created specifically for Amdarokin, who had unparalleled brute strength. Amdarokin got caught in the mudslide. At first, he did his best to struggle, but when he discovered that his feet had suddenly become muddy water, he gave up on resisting and allowed the mudslide to drag him along. Although Omdorokan was in a difficult situation, his eyes, which were filled with fighting spirit, seemed to be saying one thing. Even if you can trap me for a short period of time, so what? That was the elemental god's defense against his own physical body. Actually, that was indeed the case. Based on our deductions, the elemental god's well-tempered physical body's defense was basically unbreakable. It was quite a headache. The water elemental god's divine domain was limited, and the mudslide would soon lose its momentum. However, it was more than enough for us. Frigid winter ice river. The descent of ice instantly transformed the river into a river of ice. The frozen ice directly froze Omdorokan within. Right after that, the remaining demon army began to attack. In an instant, all those who wanted to save Omdorokan, as well as those who wanted to take advantage of the situation to kill a god, all rushed over. Omdorokan died. The wind elemental god, Camderon, angrily transformed into a storm giant. He intended to engage in melee combat with Omdorokan, reenacting the battle in the underground labyrinth. Asterisk roar. Asterisk before Camderon even arrived, the frozen Omdorokan broke free from his bindings. What was even faster than his angry roar was Camderon's gigantic, white, jade-like fist. Asterisk boom. Asterisk, there weren't any beautiful magical colors. This was only a full-powered attack, yet Camderon was instantly shattered. By the time Camderon reappeared not far away and reformed his physical body, he was already one size smaller. It was obvious that he was heavily injured. The wind elemental god had overestimated himself. In the mortal plane, he would still be able to exchange a few blows with Omdorokan, but in this world, he was weakened yet again. The earth elemental god was using his true physical body, and with the support of the dimensional laws, his power increased explosively. The difference in power between the two was now quite large. The wind elemental god, who was also a mage, had actually taken the initiative to engage in melee combat with Omdorokan, who was a pure warrior. This was another reason why he had been instantly killed. In the end, it was because the wind elemental god had underestimated Omdorokan. He had judged Omdorokan's power level based on his past experience, which was why he was at a huge disadvantage. But for me, none of this was important. From the very start, it was impossible for me to directly kill Omdorokan. However, it was enough for me to trap him. Beifong, it's your turn. Dig up his ancestral grave for me. Don't leave even a single tile behind. Right after I said that, Beifeng's reply made me feel quite uncomfortable. Relax. With me around, I guarantee that not a single mouse or cockroach will be left behind. I had been thinking about a certain question. Why did Beifeng's perfectly normal words make me feel uncomfortable all over? At this moment, outside the battlefield, the escaping giant sandworms had been stopped by someone. That smiling dragon hunter had already begun using his special ability to charm specific targets. Soon, the restless giant sandworms actually began to listen to Beifeng's commands. This was all because he told them that there was something that would allow them to obtain freedom and become even stronger. Our goal is, there's no tooth decay. Adam added fuel to the fire. No, it's the elemental throne. Dig it up. There won't be another Earth elemental god for at least the next 2,000 years. We're going to make this bastard lose his foundation and become homeless. I angrily roared as I watched the battle unfold before me and drew my longsword. Chapter 221. The battlefield was in full swing, but a certain existence that was unwilling to be left out suddenly jumped out to make his presence known. Since I'm going to dig a tunnel all the way to the elemental throne deep underground, then here's the question. Which one is better at learning how to dig? Come, my sister. Dig, 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 dig everywhere. How annoying. You've used this joke so many times already. All right then, my system had become overly active ever since I revived. Since I was already annoyed with this joke, I might as well change to another one. Learn to cook, the new X-Fawn. Apart from not teaching how to use an excavator to cook, we have all sorts of subjects. In the end, you're still an excavator. Do you really like this joke so much? Learn IT, a good job. Learn from the Great Bluebird. the exclusive teaching of the new generation's electronic information mining technology. Isn't this just digging? Forget it. I'll just ignore you forever. Ignore, ignore. I decisively ended my ridicule of the mysterious voice system and did my best to focus on the main topic at hand. Cough. Everyone, be serious. We're at war right now. I think you're the only one who's not serious. Even though I said that, everyone around me was clearly dissatisfied. Even Marguerite had an expression of resentment as she controlled such a large-scale spell formation. She was currently having a hard time, and it was all thanks to her that the spell formation had been set up. Now, she still had to control the cannon fodder and set up traps, making it even more difficult for her to multitask. Indeed, it was quite inappropriate for me to laze around and chat in the middle of a fierce battle. But now, even if I wanted to do something, I probably wouldn't be able to do anything. Immortal Lorcan had fallen into a tight encirclement. There were too many people who wanted to settle accounts with him. The moment he was trapped, everyone on both sides of the battlefield rushed towards him. As long as I get rid of him, I'll become the next Earth Elemental God. This was a rather direct statement. Omdaroken, I can finally take revenge for my grandfather/father/older brother. This was a grudge between a country and a family. But wasn't a little too much? Was Omdaroken really that bad? If he wanted to rebel, couldn't he find another reason? Gulp, gulp. All right, this fellow still didn't know how to speak the common language. The Earth Elemental Lords, who were the most proactive, were probably the various Earth Elemental Lords. Earlier, they had obviously been holding back their military strength, but now they sent out all their combat strength to attack their mortal enemies. And in order to immediately steal the enemy's divine soul and divine power, all the venerated Earth Elemental Lords personally went into battle. Under the sky, all sorts of flying gargoyles and wyverns fought against each other. Colossal creatures, such as colossi and Earth Elemental warlords, could be seen everywhere. Earth Elemental creatures were generally large and powerful, so this was a battle between giants. As they fought, the entire continent trembled, and the mountains trembled in fear. However, the Lord of the Earth never had the habit of running away. Boom! With another heavy punch, the flying tower giant slammed into a cliff in the distance, and a large piece of the cliff immediately collapsed. Apart from the Wind Elemental Lord, no one else had survived his punch. Omdaroken had used his combat achievements to display his astonishing power. At the very least, this old dog still had a mouth full of teeth. Even though he was heavily injured, Omdaroken was still quite strong. That punch he used to defeat Camderon had actually created a spatial crack, using pure physical power to break through the dimensional laws. From the moment I saw this scene, I unhesitatingly gave up on fighting him in melee combat. Using pure physical power to reach the dimensional laws, using brute force to break through the dimensional laws. Could this be the legendary Shattering the Void? If he wasn't injured, would he be able to shatter the heavens? Junior, take my space-shattering fist. All right then, I won't comment on this strange name, nor will I analyze how much energy it would take to use brute force to break through space. However, this obviously unreasonable reality was right in front of me. Right now, Omdaroken was using his true body, and with the Earth Elemental Throne's buff, he had nearly limitless power. He was completely different from his incarnation in the mortal plane. If Phillips appeared in front of Omdaroken, he would probably die in 2 punches. But no matter how strong Omdaroken was, or how obvious the difference in power was, it was impossible for Camderon, who was also an Elemental Lord, to easily admit defeat in front of everyone. Camderon is so useless. He was beaten half to death by a single punch from Omdaroken, and then he ran away like a coward. If news of this spread, Camderon's position as the Wind Elemental Lord would come to an end. Not a single Elemental Lord under his command would be willing to obey such a leader. Taste the fury of the storm. Endless thunder was summoned and transformed into lightning arrows. The storm continuously lashed at Omdaroken's head, forcefully causing it to explode. It was obvious that Cameron had learned his lesson just now and gave up on the foolish idea of fighting the Earth Elemental Lord in close combat. He intended to use long-range magic to bombard his old opponent. Countless treacherous Earth Elemental creatures surrounded Omdaroken, while he comfortably summoned all sorts of lightning from afar. It was safe and eye-catching, and his reputation wouldn't be bad if he won. But it was obvious that he had underestimated his opponent. Omdaroken dodged and used an Iron Mountain Smash, which actually broke through the restrictions of space and landed on top of Cameron's head. Then, he used a series of beautiful consecutive skills. Mount Tai Crush, MT Hua Split, Shoulder Throw, Chest Throw, Neck Clamp, Eagle Jump, Waist Throw, Iron Bridge, Depth Bomb. I didn't expect Omdaroken to be in the wrestling league. You're still in the mood to explain? Hurry up and help. Once that guy breaks free, he'll be even more difficult to deal with. Damn it, he actually has the ability to teleport. Emily was in a terrible mood. She had heard that Omdaroken was an expert in melee combat. So, she had intended to show off her skills since she was also an expert in melee combat. But looking at this super kung fu brat, she knew that she had no chance of winning. Relax, the larger an object is, the more energy it takes to teleport. If he could teleport as he pleased, he would have long since eliminated Cade, who was casting the spell. And since he's heavily injured, his stamina will obviously be low, and he won't be able to maintain his maximum output for long. What am I worried about? What does winning or losing have to do with me? I'm just curious about how he reached such a level of physical strength. After I defeat him, I want his muscle tissue as research material. At least give me an arm or a leg. If you don't agree, I'll go on strike right now. All right then, as expected, I thought that Emily was worried about the battle situation. I was too weak. This was the true nature of a witch. Yeah, your inference was correct. He did indeed become weaker after teleporting. As expected, even though Cameron was beaten up to a pulp, he wasn't injured as much as the previous punch. He still wasn't defeated, and he was even able to occasionally counterattack. However, I couldn't just watch my ally get beaten up like this, which was why I started the next step of my plan ahead of time. Beifeng, are you still not done? I heard someone's rough voice from the goblin's communication device. Dig, 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 which family is the strongest? Which family? Which family? Which family? Which family is the strongest? Find Beifeng for the Gentleman Alliance, and your dream of immigrating to Donglan can be replicated. Yep, you didn't hear wrongly. It's not 8888, nor is it 88888. As long as it's 998, you can learn Beifeng's secret method of manipulating and taming excavators. Do you guys like excavators so much? Is there no end to this joke? After my angry roar, the other side finally quieted down. Only the sound of digging could be heard. Your Highness, it's just that it's rather dark underground, so singing will help us feel more confident. After a long while, Beifeng's explanation finally came. Humph. I thought it was because you were having too much fun with those sandworms that you forgot about your mission. Did you guys invent some new method of playing? Are you having so much fun? Should I apologize for interrupting your pleasure? Hey, don't stay silent at a time like this. Did I guess correctly? Hey, say something. I'm so uneasy. All right, as long as it was related to Beifeng, there was no need to look into the details. Otherwise, this book would be censored sooner or later. However, the situation report came back very quickly. Omdaroken's nest was also protected by his divine power. The rock layer was incredibly hard, and the sandworms weren't digging smoothly. It would still take some time. But the only thing worth celebrating was that they didn't take the same path as the underground labyrinth. Instead, they dug from the ground to the surface, which allowed them to avoid many traps and obstacles. The only obstacle was the abnormally hard rock layer. Actually, this trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain had already been used before on the same person. But what was the point of using a trick? We know the approximate location of the elemental throne. It's about 300 meters below the ground. However, the closer you get to it, the denser the earth element becomes. It'll take quite some time to dig there. 300 meters? That's about the same as expected. How much longer do you need? It'll take about 2 hours. I helplessly shook my head as I glanced at Omdarokin, who was currently fighting a tiger empty-handed. If we really waited for 2 hours, all of our allies would probably have died. There's no time. Activate Plan B. Are we really going to activate Plan B? That Plan B is too dangerous. I'm absolutely certain. Hurry up and activate it. Must we? Can't we reconsider? It's too dangerous. We must. This is the best method right now. Not only that, this plan isn't dangerous at all. Time is incredibly precious at this critical moment. What's the point of making excuses? After a moment of silence, I thought that he had already begun carrying out my plan. However, I didn't expect him to speak in an embarrassed tone. Just what's Plan B? There were too many words earlier, so I didn't read it. Later, it was too dark underground, so I couldn't read it. I just turned on the lights, but I couldn't find it. I think I accidentally fed the plan to a certain cutie. I almost crushed my communication device right there and then. You said so much just to hide the fact that you forgot what Plan B is. You fed a cutie? Why don't you feed yourself as well? I thought you were worried about the consequences of Plan B, but I'm so weak. Just you wait. When you come out at hashtag #yin%, there had never been a person who easily angered me. No wonder the town security treated eating, sleeping, and beating up Bayphone as part of their daily routine. This bastard really knew how to make people angry. All right, no matter how angry I was, I couldn't possibly beat up Bayphone through my communication device. Life still had to go on. Since he had forgotten what Plan B was, I might as well explain it to him. Move in an arc and give me a coordinate. I let out a long sigh after explaining the plan. When we reach the mortal plane, I'm going to lock this bastard up in a rare beast zoo as an exhibit. This bastard definitely meets the standard of a rare beast. Are you sure that it's a punishment and not a reward? Amelia's words caused me to fall silent. After a while, I came to a decision. Then send him to the gray elves to help rebuild. There are lots of beautiful elven women there, and many brats want to go there. But I feel that even if there are beautiful elven women around, there won't be a single rabbit to be found. That's the scariest punishment for that guy. Your Highness, please don't. I'll immediately carry out Plan B. I guarantee that I'll complete your requests with high quality and efficiency. Please don't send me to hell. If you really insist, I'd rather stay in this world. I still hadn't turned off my communication device when I heard Bayfing's begging. This man who didn't take the normal path was actually afraid of something. This job that countless young adults dreamed of was actually a nightmare in his eyes, and he was actually willing to stay in this hellish earth elemental plane. Didn't you say that this world is the real hell? Before I even finished speaking, I instantly recalled the time when I first met Bayfong and his various strange-looking followers. They could basically hold an exhibition of the creatures of the earth elemental plane. After trying to guess what he intended to do, I didn't want to guess at all. Shut up and do your job properly. Otherwise, I'll send you to a paradise where only elven beauties are. Why does that sound so awkward? At this moment, a shadow had already covered the battlefield above our heads. A gigantic object was slowly moving. That's a bird. That's a gnome helicopter. That's a Superman. No, that's a gigantic duck. That's right, this was the core of our Plan B, the ultimate yellow duck. The moving fortress yellow duck was personally supervised by the great stone sculptor Ainslow. Countless tower giants were responsible for its construction, and it was incomparably gigantic. When looking up from the ground, it looked like a gigantic floating island. Although we hadn't yet had time to install any weapons on it, just its gigantic mass gave it unstoppable momentum. No matter what obstacles it faced, it would still reach its destination. In order to make it directly usable, we even stopped it in midair and waited for further orders. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the appearance of this gigantic moving fortress changed the entire situation on the battlefield. Its ferocious appearance astonished all the witnesses. Even Omdaroken was astonished to see it. When he discovered where the duck had landed, he immediately teleported over to help. Just as expected, the moment the yellow duck landed, it stuck its feet into the ground, spread its wings, and suddenly opened its mouth wide to let out an angry roar. Woof! At that instant, the entire battlefield paused. Or perhaps it should be said that nobody expected a duck to have such a unique roar. Amelia couldn't help but nod. What an astonishingly excellent design. Did you think I would say that? Roland, that's your bad taste again. Are you intending to embarrass yourself in multiple dimensions? Oomph. Foolish mortals will never understand the ingenuity of a genius's design. See, this is only the beginning. Its gigantic body's feet were now firmly planted into the ground. That was its fulcrum, and its spread wings represented its center of gravity. Its tilted upper body was the best form of balance. And then it suddenly lowered its head with all its strength. Asterisk crack. Asterisk the ultimate yellow duck ate a mouthful of dirt, then spat out another mouthful of dirt, then ate another mouthful of dirt, then spat out another mouthful of dirt. Damn it, with such a huge commotion, it's more like an excavator than anything else. Why did I say still? Adam's comment doubtlessly explained what everyone else was thinking. Everyone nodded in agreement. Learn how to excavate which one is stronger. At this moment, my system was unwilling to be left out. Ever since I came up with this plan B, it had never forgotten about this joke. That's enough. This is a yellow duck, the ultimate weapon. Moving fortress, not an excavator. Chapter 2:22. What seemed like a ridiculous plan of mine was actually the cruelest way to kill me. For Amdarokin, this was a situation of life and death. The ripples of forbidden spells in front of me were becoming more and more intense. The gigantic yellow monster behind me was currently digging into its nest. It seemed that going forward or backward would only lead to death. And my allies were untrustworthy. No matter how strong a contract was, it would be unable to withstand the passage of time. Would he calmly die in battle because of a contract signed by his grandfather or ancestor? No one would be so foolish as to run away after fighting for a while. The sand dragons and stone giants also discovered that their opponents were difficult to deal with, so they started fighting peacefully. Most of them circled around the battlefield, and very few of them fought to the death. Amdarokin had been gone for far too long. Thousands of years had passed, and his most trusted subordinates had long since disappeared. If he had enough time, 30 years, Amdarokin was absolutely confident that he would be able to re-establish his own faction and gather enough subordinates. But unfortunately, how can I give you time? Am I so foolish as to nurture a tiger that will only invite calamity? Of course, I knew what Amdarokin was thinking. From a certain standpoint, we were the same type of people. We were both narrow-minded people who wouldn't feel comfortable if we didn't take revenge. If we had an enemy, we wouldn't be able to sleep well until we eliminated them completely. I'll just say that you're narrow-minded and hold grudges. By the way, is it really okay to have such an unrighteous male lead? You're actually a myth-ranked hero? Are the historians blind? You're the antagonist. Shut up. I did my best to suppress my anger. Recently, my system's existence had been far too strong. It seemed that ever since it reactivated, it had been in high spirits and was always looking for opportunities to make me angry. If I continued to comment, I would fall into this damned systems trap. But from a certain standpoint, my system wasn't wrong. I was indeed narrow-minded. The fresh blood on the snowy ground from that day was still fresh in my mind, and the warrior's dying words were still fresh in my ears. How could I be at ease as long as Amdarokin didn't die? Checkmate. Both sides are aiming for your vitals, the elemental throne. I think you should focus on that side. Do you think your son Wukong capable of creating clones? Looking at the scene in front of me, I spat out a mouthful of blood. Unknowingly, I had really jinxed it. With a twist of its body, the huge stone giant split into 3 smaller stone giants that ran in 2 different directions. As it ran, the stone giant absorbed the earth element to grow stronger, then split again, and evolved again. In a short 10 seconds, more than 30 Amdarokin had appeared. Impossible. How are we supposed to deal with so many earth elemental gods? Some people panicked. That's impossible. If every doppelganger was as strong as Amdarokin, he would have used it long ago. No, as long as each doppelganger has half of its strength, we won't be able to win. That must be a fantasy. Some of them were slightly calmer, but their trembling legs betrayed their lack of confidence. Humans are humans, demons are demons, and elemental creatures have elemental creatures' mothers. But I'd like to ask one more thing. Amdarokin, what's your mother's surname? Yet, I was speaking viciously. However, my seemingly useless nagging was actually the most painful part of elemental creatures. It was also my understanding of what was happening before me, as well as my disdain for Amdarokin. Apart from top-level elemental creatures that were capable of transforming into humanoid form, ordinary elemental creatures didn't even have a gender. Naturally, they didn't have a normal method of reproduction. Their method of reproduction was to rely on cloning and splitting like low-level creatures. That was why it was quite common for Earth elemental creatures to split off certain parts of their bodies to create clones. However, such simple clones wouldn't have any sense of self. They would be nothing more than puppets controlled by the Earth elemental. In order to create a new life and consciousness and complete reproduction, the Earth elemental creature would need to split its soul and split off half of its power to create a new physical body. Low-level elemental creatures would naturally be born in places with high elemental density. More than 90% of the elemental creatures in the elemental planes were low-level elemental creatures that relied on their instincts. They lacked intelligence and knowledge. Even if they instinctively split off, they would be able to quickly absorb the elemental energy from the outside world to replenish their bodies. Most of the time, they would naturally reproduce. However, high-level elemental creatures would be more troublesome. Every time an elemental creature naturally split off, it would be at its weakest. High-level elemental creatures also had their own instincts to reproduce. This would be quite difficult to control. If they couldn't suppress it at the right time, and their enemies came looking for them. That was why old Earth elemental lords would do their best to suppress their instincts to split off unless absolutely necessary. If they couldn't suppress it and ended up splitting off a young body, it was highly likely that their enemies would ambush them and kill them. In order to prevent their enemies from discovering their weakened state, some shameless elemental lords would unhesitatingly devour their newly split heads. This way, not only would they be able to make up for their losses, but they would also greatly increase their overall strength. From a certain standpoint, every naturally intelligent high-level elemental creature's first enemy would likely be their own parents. Originally, only elemental creatures existed, so this type of living habit was quite normal. However, after coming into contact with the outside world, they gradually understood how the outside world viewed it. High-level elemental creatures viewed devouring their own children as an ugly behavior. Asking them who their parents were would be no different from asking them how they killed their own parents to survive. In the library, we looked through a large amount of information and all agreed that Amdarokin had the ability to create clones. Apart from being an elemental creature's instincts, there were even more records of Amdarokin appearing in different locations at the same time. I've seen at most 3 clones, and every single one of them is incredibly strong. And the strange part is that destroying any one of them doesn't cause any damage to Amdarokin's main body. It's as if they're completely unrelated to each other. This was Camderon's original words. Based on this, we made many guesses, such as that Amdarokin was actually a triplet, that he had several sons that formed a father and son team with him, that his natural talent ability allowed him to create clones, and so on. There were over 100 guesses. However, all of these guesses were shattered by reality. Every single Amdarokin had similar but slightly different energy waves from Amdarokin's main body. They also had their own independent mana source, so it was obvious that they weren't clones. It's as if they're his own children. These energy waves are basically his split-off body. There's only one explanation for this. He devoured his own split-off children and transformed them into his own clones. He's always carrying them on his body, intending to use them as consumables at a critical moment. How is this any different from a foolish ogre? No, even an ogre wouldn't eat their own species and their own children. The water elemental goddess Aelos had a fatigued expression after she finished setting up the magical traps. However, her expression towards Amdarokin also contained a hint of disdain. Not every elemental creature was capable of being so completely devoid of humanity. As Stonevilla's wife, Aelos had many descendants. Although most of them had already died, They had experienced the love life of a normal life. She was filled with disdain towards Onderoken's actions. Even though she despised Onderoken's actions, an even harsher reality was right in front of us. Our opponents were far stronger than we had expected. Due to the difference in age, these 30-some Onderoken's power levels were vastly different. The strongest Onderoken's elemental energy waves were only a third of Onderoken's, while the weakest Onderoken was probably only slightly stronger than Earth elemental lords. However, when it came to quality, with Onderoken as the benchmark, the number of Onderoken's elemental energy waves was already quite impressive, especially since all of them were clones of a martial arts master. Not only that, they also had bodies that were practically impenetrable. Although these Onderoken's physical bodies were different, they were all controlled by the same will. They split into two groups and broke out of the encirclement. There were 17 or 18 Onderoken on each side, and as they broke out of the encirclement, they actually displayed a well-practiced and well-coordinated combat teamwork. Some Onderoken kicked, some Onderoken punched, and some Onderoken crashed into each other. Every Onderoken had their own responsibilities and cooperated with each other, instantly breaking out of the encirclement. The 18 Arhats? Or are they planning on filming a martial arts movie? Just what year is this old joke? There were people who wanted to stop the Earth elemental god from breaking out of the encirclement, but they always mysteriously died. Only we, who had a bird's-eye view of the entire situation, were able to see the black shadow that suddenly flashed behind the Earth elemental god's back. How shameless! Not only is he hiding among his own clones, he's even ambushing an opponent who's much weaker than him. Should I say that shameless people were undefeatable? That Arhut formation seemed quite powerful, but the worst part was that Onderoken himself was hiding his own power level. He would appear to be about the same level as his own clones, but if he really happened to fight against his clones, he would suddenly explode forth with power to instantly kill his opponents, and then use his abnormal ability to sneak back into his clones. That's indeed quite powerful, but it's meaningless against us. Asterisk snap. Asterisk with a snap of my fingers. The traps that had already been set up were activated, and several catapults were pushed out. However, the catapults that were thrown out were all green buckets. Asterisk boom. Asterisk asterisk boom. Asterisk the buckets exploded one by one, and black oil splashed everywhere before being set on fire. This was the refined oil that I had obtained from the gnomes. The raging flames transformed into an angry volcano that devoured everything around it. The fire borrowed the power of the oil, and a boundless sea of flames devoured everything. But soon, with an angry roar, the flames were extinguished and numerous pitch-black figures appeared in the flames. Why did a quick count? There was actually not a single one missing. This type of fire would be fatal to ordinary humans, but it would be a little troublesome for elemental lords. But for Immortal Lorcan and his clones, this type of low-level physical fire could basically be ignored. The only result was that their body temperature would rise slightly, and their faces would be covered in a layer of black smoke. However, I laughed. Ignoring them was already the best. Asterisk snap. Asterisk another snap of my fingers. How could it be possible that the water elemental god would only work on this trap once after working so hard for so long? A flood of water poured down on their heads, and a mudslide wiped them all out. This was indeed a completely boring trap, but sometimes it was fine as long as it was useful. This trap that was specially made to deal with creatures with brute strength was indeed quite effective. Ice. The ice trap activated again, directly freezing them in ice. Roar. Immortal Lorcan roared furiously as he instantly broke through the ice barrier. This sort of attack had no effect on him at all, and it was basically just a shower for him. Instead, it made him exceptionally angry. In his mind, this sort of mischievous attack was a form of humiliation. Asterisk snap. Asterisk several hundred green buckets flew over to me as my answer, and the raging flames enveloped them once more. This time, the oil was no different from the previous one, and the result was the same as before. Soon, a group of stone giants with angry expressions appeared, but this time, it was slightly different. Asterisk crack. Asterisk the sound of stone cracking wouldn't be much on the battlefield. But for me, who had long since been waiting for this, it was heavenly. Asterisk snap. Asterisk the flood came again. Asterisk snap. Asterisk the ice froze again. Asterisk snap. Asterisk the sea of flames appeared once more. Asterisk crack. Asterisk crack. Asterisk this time. The sound of cracking was abnormally obvious, and many of the stone giants' bodies were already covered in cracks. One of the youngest of Immortal Orcan's children had already collapsed. He directly shattered into pieces and turned into white rubble, ending his long life as a puppet. Impossible. This sort of attack can't possibly break through our magic defense. Looking at the angry roars and shocked expressions of my old opponent, my mood became even better. Does this have anything to do with magic defense? It's just that the sudden change in temperature causes heat to expand and cold to contract. It's very easy for stones to become brittle and explode under repeated changes of heat and cold. This is a basic property of an object. If you have the ability, change this property as well. Asterisk snap. Asterisk, although the other party had asked, I wasn't so stupid as to explain the battlefield to the enemy. Since this method was effective, I might as well silently make a fortune and continue. Another baptism of ice and sea of flames occurred, and this time, another 5 sons of Omdarokin collapsed. Asterisk snap. Asterisk after this process, there weren't many left. Omdarokin had already given up on his disguise and was trying to break out of the encirclement at all costs. However, the Thunder Eagle formed from lightning blocked his path. A meat shield like Adam was meant to be used at a critical moment when he lost control. The furious Cameron also began tossing lightning bolts to suppress him. Asterisk snap. Asterisk this time, another dozen or so sons of Omdarokin collapsed. Asterisk snap. Asterisk after 3 more cycles. Only Omdarokin himself was left standing. All of the clones he had accumulated over the past several tens of thousands of years had been destroyed, and his white, jade-like body was now covered in cracks. The powerful Omdarokin seemed to have been forced to the brink, but his vicious eyes showed that he had no intention of giving up. Although it's nice to gather all the small monsters together for an AoE attack, it's far too ineffective against a boss. It seems that it won't be so easy to deal with him. Asterisk boom. Asterisk only the continuously digging yellow duck meant that time was on our side, forcing Omdarokin to go all out. No matter what trump cards he had to use them now. Come, I'll show you what it means to be a mage's slyness and shamelessness. Cough, that's wrong. It should be a mage's knowledge and wisdom. Seeing Marguerite and Amelia suddenly glaring at me angrily, I managed to correct myself in time. Since you finally used modern knowledge to bully the natives, doing something that transmigrators should do, there's a reward? Is it a title or a point? Wonderful. You've finally started doing something that my system should be talking about. I believe that it won't be long before I level up, wield a god equipment, become a boss, marry a beautiful, rich, and beautiful woman, and reach the peak of my life. Just thinking about it makes me excited. Let me sing you a song. Actually, I've been preparing this song for many years. The Transmigrator's loudspeaker has begun to broadcast. We Transmigrators have power. This power is iron. This power is steel. All right then, I was really too weak to have any expectations for my system. Shut up. Your singing is even worse than Grius. You insulted the system, deducting 100 fate points. This is the first time I've had my points deducted, and you actually have this function. Are you that displeased that I said your singing is bad? Chapter 223. Before this battle, we had a lot of discussions. A doppelganger created by splitting elements? When the cold and hot intersect, blasted away. Diamond petrification? This is indeed a possibility. The more I think about it, the more possible it seems. If it really happens, how should I deal with it? Diamond-type crystals are actually very easy to deal with. A more stable molecular structure also meant a greater fear of change. Temperature would change their structure and state. They were basically not resistant to high temperatures, so it would be enough to roast the entire battlefield. I'll get the gnomes to prepare some top-grade fuel. Is it possible to become gigantified? Don't novels always say that the final boss will suddenly become very big? Renee, stop reading those unreliable biographies and night stories. Although a large body can increase physical strength, its speed and reaction speed will definitely slow down. Suddenly becoming large on the battlefield is akin to turning itself into a huge target. Besides, if its body's energy level doesn't change, spending a large amount of energy to reconstruct and change its physical body is something that only an idiot would do. But just to be safe, let's install a self-destruct device on the yellow duck. I'll leave that to the gnomes as well. I think he might have the ability to teleport at high speed in the ground. There is indeed a variant of earth magic that is similar to the spatial gate. All right, then prepare more goblin mines and have the earth elemental god inject large amounts of lead bromine and mercury sulfide into the ground. Is this useful? It's very useful. As long as you're infected with lead bromine, you won't be able to use any spatial abilities. As for mercury sulfide, it's also known as the poison of earth. A small gram is enough to disintegrate the earth element. If Embark really intends to travel through the earth, what other abilities do they have? Let's think about it more. By the way, can we prepare an anti-gravity trap? We have a lot of earth magic mages. As long as we can reduce gravity to 0, I don't believe that he'll be able to withstand such a high mass. The warriors' pre-battle meeting lasted no more than 10 minutes. It was all about, let's go see that bastard. Where should we go to kill that bastard? Where should we go to celebrate after we kill him? Where should we go to celebrate? Bar or barbecue. They did not even consider what to do if they lost the fight. What? You're asking what to do if they lost? You dare to shake the morale of the army? Drag him out and behead him. Power and glory, blood and thunder. By the way, is this slogan really okay? I feel like it's another name for send. At least add some tactics and brain cells. But for a group of mages, the amount of time needed for a pre-battle meeting would be several times longer than the actual battle itself. It was quite common for mages to prepare for a battle for at least half a month. Endless meetings and discussions were boring, but the results were usually quite good. As long as the enemy had been identified and had sufficient time to prepare, they would repeatedly study the enemy's weaknesses and strengths and come up with several or even dozens of countermeasures. If they met the opponent at the place and time they expected, the outcome was basically decided. Right now, it was a classic battle of a mage bullying a musclehead. Ah, that guy actually dug into the ground. It's exploding. Look, it's coming out. Puffed. One side is green and the other is black. How miserable. He transformed. White jade turns into diamond. What a pity. Why is it black diamond? Sure enough, every lucky guy who looks like a European commander will turn into an African commander in the next second. Those Udi deserve to die. I don't understand. There's no need to understand. It's a professional term. The anti-gravity trap has been activated. Wow. He actually flew up to the sky like a balloon. He's falling down. Hurry up and tell the cannon fodder to hide. That guy is planning to teleport again. Fire all 200-dimensional anchors. That guy actually only teleported his upper body. He's split up. Oh, he can actually put himself back together. He's as disgusting as a lizard. Renee broke out in a cold sweat as she looked at the group of mages who were taking pleasure in Roland's misfortune. For the first time, she wondered if she had chosen the wrong job class. Embark, who was almost invincible in melee combat, was actually being toyed with like this. At this moment, she couldn't help but recall some classic rumors that had been circulating far and wide. In the eyes of a mage, there are only two jobs in the world: the mage's own peers and the cannon fodder ABCD. Never fight against a mage on the battlefield that he has prepared for a long time. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died. Pay special attention and never attack the mage's own mage tower at home. With all his belongings and decades of preparation, he can easily unleash more than 10 times his original combat strength. As a pure warrior, the first reaction of seeing a mage enemy is to rush up and hack him to death. hack him to death, or be toyed with to death by him after he's recovered. Choose for yourself. A mage is his own son. Isn't that too unfair? I'm sorry, there's no such thing as balance in this world. Don't you think about it? The difficulty of leveling up for a mage is several times, or even several dozen times that of other job classes. Also, is the difficulty of leveling up by collecting knowledge and leveling up by throwing punches the same? Do you know how many mages are stuck at the silver rank? It's more than 99%. You want to defeat a high-level mage? Turn the battle into a surprise attack and encounter battle. You want to charge indirectly? What's your name? Why do I need to know your name? At least let me think about what your epitaph should be written on it. The 108th idiot who charged to death? In fact, at that moment, Rene even wanted to ask Roland to change his job class. After all, Roland had once successfully trained across job classes. After hesitating for a moment, she finally remembered something else. In the past, she had indeed asked Heloise to teach her magic, but she could only helplessly give up. You want to learn magic from me? Okay, as long as you pass the test, I'll teach you. Let's start with the basics of calculus and derivatives. If you don't understand, you'll understand after watching. Don't worry, it's not difficult. Roland is the one who invented it. He often uses it to train his logical thinking ability. We even intend to promote it in the entire magic world. So far, the response has been pretty good. As long as you can understand it, it proves that you have the talent for it. I'll teach you real magic. Back then, she listened to 2 classes full of hope. Then, her eyes were filled with numbers and symbols. The more she listened, the more dizzy she felt. Then, she fainted in class. She actually fainted in class. What a waste of my time. Using Roland's words, scum with less than 9 intelligence should just go and be cannon fodder. At that time, Heloise's comments made Rene quite displeased. But if she wanted to learn magic, she had to start from those ridiculous numbers. So, Rene immediately felt that it was better to continue training with her sword. Besides, the power of chaos wouldn't be any weaker than that of a mage. On the contrary, the power of chaos, which was the source of the power, was even stronger. But right now, looking at Roland, Amelia, and the others who were excitedly discussing magic, Rene mysteriously felt a trace of displeasure. Then, her chest suddenly trembled as a tremendous power of chaos flowed through her bloodline. Yes, there's no need for me to be envious of them. I have my own path as well. Demons disdain using traps and detection. Aren't they invincible? Cavendish's teachings suddenly echoed in her ears. From a moment that the power of the elements was explained with logic, elemental magic had nothing to do with chaos. Controlling chaos doesn't require logic. Willpower is the key. You can treat power as your subjects. All you need to do is use the tyrant's willpower. Who cares what they think? Only what I observed was allowed to exist. I hoped that things would happen as I wished, so it really did happen. As for the principles and whatnot, that wasn't important from the very start. The more stubborn and resolute one's willpower is, the more suitable it is for controlling chaos. That's why Roland can't do it. He's too reasonable and needs to research everything. Meanwhile, you're just like me. You seem reasonable, but you're actually extremely self-centered. You're born to be a tyrant, born to control chaos. Rene clenched her fists. The firstborn of chaos had given her the right to control chaos. The endless void had given her endless power. Pitch-black turbidity leaked out from the dimensional cracks. This was the most fundamental source of power in all dimensions. The power of chaos began to distort this world. Under the guidance of a mysterious willpower, Rene began to chant in a low voice. She gazed at the fallen children of Omderoken. My pitiful children, I can sense your anger and helplessness. You've been deprived of your ability to survive even before you were born. Is there anything crueler in this world? You were swallowed up by your father the moment you arrived in this beautiful world. Is there anything more detestable than this world? I, Rene Chin Mist, the agent of chaos, shall give you one more chance. Become my slave in exchange for one more chance at revenge. Come, children, if you're unwilling to remain silent, Then give me your souls filled with resentment and anger. Allow chaos to construct new bodies for you. Renee's hands landed on the ground. There was no light at all when she touched the ground. At that instant, certain natural laws had been distorted. All the semi-god mages looked at her in astonishment. They were incredibly sensitive to elemental fluctuations. How could they possibly miss such an obvious power of chaos? Renee didn't realize just how astonishing of a thing she had just done. Only now did she regain her senses. She rubbed the back of her head, not knowing what to do. What did I do? The power of chaos once again distorted the natural laws of life and death for elemental life forms. The elemental children, which should have been shattered and returned to the mortal plane, once again gathered together. Their incomplete bodies pieced together, and their souls filled with hatred combined with the power of chaos. Their long-lived souls finally came back to life, and the deformed, rebellious children of the earth finally stood up. Just from their appearances, they seemed like stone giants that had been randomly pieced together. Their entire bodies were covered in triangular, snow-white crystals. Every single one of them had been pieced together by at least 2 or 3 children of Omdaroken. Deformed bodies with 6 arms and 8 legs were quite common. On their bodies, the numerous elemental eyes were all wide open. Their murky yellow eyes were filled with the deepest hatred, as if they had died with grievances. Renee's pure power of chaos was nothing more than a catalyst and glue. What caused these existences that shouldn't exist to return to the world was the hatred and anger these children had for the world and Omdaroken. I hate you. I hate my father. I hate everything in this world. I curse the world that gave birth to me. Just a single glance at them would cause the words of hatred to roar repeatedly in their minds. Mortals with weak wills would go insane. These 7 stone giants that had been pieced together were now living crystals of hatred. The entire continent was shaking. They were crying out in pain and anguish. Thunder boomed in the clouds as the furious elemental plane began to curse everything that was about to happen. Pitch-black clouds covered everything. The elemental plane couldn't bear to see what was about to happen. It couldn't bear to see its beloved children transform into existences cursed by the gods. Distorted divine power reactions. According to the Dimensional Encyclopedia, this is negative divine power. This type of power can only exist in one type of life form. Marguerite adjusted her eyeglasses. She had a rare expression of astonishment. She then hurriedly sent a signal to Adam, telling him to hurry up and retreat. If her guess was correct, the upcoming battle would be incredibly dangerous, far more dangerous than fighting against Omdaroken. Actually, she didn't even need to give any instructions. Adam's combat instincts had always been sharp. He immediately ran in front of the wind elemental god when he saw Cambrin turn around and run away like a rabbit. Wonderful. I was actually able to meet such a miraculous thing. My notebook is on fire. Hurry up and write it down. Amelia's reaction was as helpless as ever. Wonderful. I have an inspiration. My new 7 virtues are about to be born. All right then. Let's ignore this crazy witch who had revealed her true colors and was currently laughing maniacally. Omdaroken is still a god, and these children are divine children who weren't expected to be born. Under the influence of the power of chaos, their divine power has begun to transform negatively. All the conditions have been met. That's right, just like Shadow, this is a new type of item cursed by the gods, divine sins. Divine sins were a mistake. They were products of divine power that shouldn't exist and were unforeseen. As souls that died prematurely, divine sins continued to live on. They absorbed nourishment from their divine power and pure hatred towards their ancestors and all natural products. Uncontrollable divine sins were cursed by the gods with hatred, fear. That's right, they possessed power that even the gods' ancestors feared. In fact, they often countered the gods' power. When facing a true divine sin, it was absolutely necessary to treat it as a true evil god. Otherwise, death would be certain. Under the guidance of Omdaroken's self-inflicted sins and the will of chaos, These divine sins of elemental gods, which were named the unfilial children of the earth, arrived in this world. All of their gazes were locked onto their father. Their eyes were filled with hatred, and their gaping mouths were filled with desire for delicious food. Divine sins are a mistake. It's an existence that shouldn't exist. As mages, if you haven't reached semi-god rank, you should retreat upon seeing them. If they see you, it'll be too late. Luckily, the chances of meeting them are basically zero. If you really meet them, then consider yourself unlucky. I finally understand why the Monster Encyclopedia said that. These things are far too dangerous. Unlike ordinary elemental creatures that receive support from the Earth elemental plane, the unfilial children of the Earth obtained elemental power by mercilessly and forcefully stealing it. Around them, all other Earth elemental creatures began to naturally die. Tall tower giants instantly turned into rubble, while powerful sand dragons became dried lizards. It was unknown what other abilities they possessed, but just the side effects of their existence were more than enough to make them the natural enemy of all Earth elemental creatures. They were born due to their hatred towards Omdaroken, and they also possessed the power of Omdaroken. Without a doubt, they were the natural enemy of Omdaroken, the divine sins of the Earth. The moment they appeared on the battlefield, all the Earth elemental lords began to furiously flee. This was the fatal fear of frogs seeing a poisonous snake. In front of their natural enemy, they were nothing more than backup food. In the next moment, the 7 divine bastard brothers started a deadly fight with their father. Hey, Roland, even these things have appeared. How do you intend to deal with this? These things are even more dangerous than Omdaroken. Are you going to collectively flee back to the mortal plane after this battle? Don't be so noisy. I'm thinking about something important. Could it be that you have a way to control the divine sins? This is a new topic that no one has ever been able to accomplish before. Do you need me to request research funding from the Truth Overseers? No. Who can control those things? I'm just giving them names. What do you think of the 7 Golden Gourd brothers? The one with the biggest 8 eyes is the first baby. The one with the brightest eyes is the second baby. The one that looks super hard is the third baby. The one that is roasted red is the 4th baby. The one with water stains on his body is the 5th baby. The one with the smallest and least presence is the 6th baby. And the one with a gourd-like stone on his back is the 7th baby. Hey, why are you all walking away? Aren't these names good? I won't insult you anymore. Do you think that these people from another world will understand your joke? This joke is too cold. This is a super old joke that reveals one's age. I'm not joking. I'm being serious. That's even sadder. No, it's even scarier. Your naming talent is as terrible as ever. Shut up. Someone who's tone deaf doesn't have a right to be a mic hog. Gore brothers, 7 flowers on a vine. Not afraid of the wind and the rain. La 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 la. You're all so off topic. Are you intending on killing someone with OCD? Just kill me.